that it would probably cost less than $400 million for the Pentagon to transform a luxury Qatari jet to be given to President Trump to use as Air Force One. He made the comments as he testified about military readiness before the House Armed Services Committee.
Committee will come to order. I want to welcome our witnesses and thank you all for your service to our great country. We are here today to hear from the Department of the Air Force on its FY26 budget request. Unfortunately, we've still not received information on the Air Force's budget request, which makes today's hearing a little difficult. We'll need that budget in order to fully evaluate how Congress can best support our airmen and guardians. We're facing the most complex threat environment in history. China is moving forward on sixth-generation fighter jets and sophisticated air defense systems. They are expanding their nuclear arsenal at an alarming rate. And they are deploying advanced hypersonic weapons and long-range cruise missiles capable of hitting our homeland. That's why it's never been more important to invest in modern systems that will deter and defeat threats against our nation. Fortunately, the House-passed reconciliation bill makes generational investments in our national security. The bill provides over $7 billion to support air superiority, including funds to acquire the F-47, the most advanced and lethal aircraft ever built. It provides $13 billion to modernize our nuclear deterrent and rebuild related infrastructure, and it invests over $25 billion in Golden Dome layered missile defense system. But sixth-generation fighters, nuclear modernization, and Golden Dome are all big-ticket items that will take years to fully develop. And the funding in our reconciliation bill will not be enough to fully support those initiatives. That's why it's so important for defense spending to grow in the out years. Reconciliation is a one-time investment. We've got to do more. It must be followed by healthy increases in the base budget so we can afford to fill these critical capabilities without cuts to readiness. While I'm supportive of much of the Air Force's work, I do have concerns with some of the ongoing projects. Nuclear deterrence is vital to our national security, and I'm concerned that the Air Force is not adequately prioritizing it. Specifically, I'm troubled by past mismanagement of the Sentinel program. We must ensure Sentinel is ready in time to replace the current ICBMs before they reach their end of life. Congress has been explicit about the need to address Sentinel's cost and schedule overruns. We have prioritized and appropriated funding to fix these problems, and yet the Air Force has taken $1.2 billion out of Sentinel funds and used them instead to meet our other priorities in FY25. I want to be very clear. The Sentinel program is vital to modernizing our triad and ensuring nuclear deterrence. Senior Air Force leaders have made frequent statements agreeing that the service must prioritize nuclear deterrence. It's time to start walking the walk. I look forward to working with you to get this program back on track. I'm also concerned with our ability to fight and win in space. Specifically, I worry that when we see the budget, it may not adequately fund the Space Force. This is one reason why we need budget details so we can evaluate whether the funding is in line with our priorities. Within the Space Force, I want to be sure we don't lose sight of our mission. Space Force got its start in this committee driven by a desire to improve the way we buy things for space. Winning the fight in space requires us to quickly develop advanced systems and platforms. Doing so starts with highly trained acquisition professionals. Every guardian supports the warfighting mission. So I encourage you to ensure that in the Space Force, operators, acquisition, intel, and cyber professionals are all on equal footing. Finally, as the department starts rebalancing the General Officer Corps, I strongly encourage you to ensure that the Space Force receives additional billets to address its unique needs as a new and growing service. I look forward to working with you to ensure our airmen and guardians have the resources they need to successfully carry out their critical missions. With that, I yield to my friend, the ranking member, for any opening statement he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as is usually the case, I agree substantially with your assessment. And the budget certainly is where the problem starts. I mean, first of all, we don't have one. This is the latest we've gone in history, I believe, without getting a budget is very important. I know you gentlemen are not in charge of that, but to the extent that you have influence, if we could encourage the White House to get this process moving, that would be enormously helpful. It's difficult for Congress to do its job and adequately fund our needs without having the starting point of the President's budget. But the second problem is what the Chairman alluded to. Within the needs that we know that we're looking at in the Air Force's area, there's a lot to cram in there, and it does not appear like it's going to all fit. So I'm particularly curious, as you're trying to balance, as we move towards the F-47, the former NGAD, we try to upgrade the nuclear triad, meet our fighter attack needs, deal with the UAVs, all of that space, how does that come together and fit into a budget that makes sense? Because it seems like, we are starting a lot of programs that ultimately we're not going to be able to afford to fund all of them. So it'd be better if we made choices up front. So we're going to have a lot of questions about how does that work? How does all of these programs go forward and we still wind up with the budget that we need? In space, I am encouraged by the improvements that have been made on building a resilient architecture. Space is so central to everything we do in terms of secure communications, dealing with contested logistics. We've made a lot of progress, and I want to thank the chairman, and in absentia, thank Mr. Cooper, former member. It was the chairman and Mr. Cooper who had the vision to create the Space Force in the first place. I think that's enormously important. But we'd like to get further updates on how that architecture is being updated to make it more resilient and meet all of those very difficult needs. Lastly, as I'm sure you've heard, acquisition reform is an enormous priority for this committee and for Congress. We're going to take a big swing at it this year. We'd be curious to hear your thoughts about what that looks like. Sadly, within your department, between the tanker, the F-35, and the Sentinel, we have a lot of experience with programs that went way over budget. What have we learned? How can we do that better? And then connected to that as well, something we talked about yesterday, taking advantage of a lot of, in many cases, smaller, innovative companies that are building crucial things around missiles, satellites, UAVs, that are much cheaper and much more effective in many instances. How do we integrate those new innovative companies into the defense department so we can take advantage of the technologies and the equipment that they're building? With that, I look forward to your testimony, and I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. Now I'd like to introduce our witnesses. The Honorable Troy Mink is the Secretary of the Air Force. Congratulations and welcome. General Chance Saltzman, Chief of Space Operations, welcome back. And General David Alvin is Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Welcome back, General. I want to start with you, Mr. Mink. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, and distinguished members of the committee, General Alvin, General Saltzman, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. We're looking forward to it. The Department of the Air Force is at an inflection point. We are engaging in a fast-paced race for technology superiority against a well-resourced strategic opponent. However, we simultaneously face personnel and platform challenges affecting our immediate readiness. We must balance our requirements to generate readiness and project power today with the imperative to rebuild our military and develop capabilities so that we can continue to deter our adversaries tomorrow. Our fiscal priorities are focused on addressing the balance between these realities and supporting national security objectives as outlined in the interim national defense guidance. The scope and severity of the threat to our homeland and national interests are significant and increasing, and we are now facing one of the most dangerous security environments in our history. The Department of the Air Force has structured our long-term strategy around the belief that China is our pacing threat, and this reality directly influences the department's fiscal priorities. China's defense budget has nearly doubled during the past 11 years, growing 6% annually on average. U.S. defense spending has seen around 3% growth over the same period, increasing below the rate of inflation over the last 5 years, and many of our allies and partners' defense spending rates are even lower than ours. These limitations have allowed China to start closing the gap. Defending the homeland is the Department of the Air Force's top priority. We will be continuing to do so by modernizing our nuclear force, especially through the Sentinel, the B-21, long-range standoff weapons, as well as the nuclear command and control and communication that supports these systems. We're also eager to support the President's Golden Dome for America. While still in the conceptual stage, there is no question that the Department of the Air Force will have a significant role in this project. Our next priority is to deter China. We will do this through investments in our people, our readiness, and our posture within the Indo-Pacific region. We believe that our people are and will continue to be one of the nation's key competitive advantages. We are working to train our airmen and guardians to confront the brutal challenges that warfare without sanctuary presents. We are emphasizing readiness by creating new inspections, assessments, and exercises geared towards preparing our personnel for this environment. Finally, we are strengthening our posture within the Indo-Pacific region, conducting high-level operational exercises that will test our ability to deploy and operate in austere environments. Lastly, the Department of the Air Force is prepared to provide critical capabilities and forces to the joint warfighter in order to defeat our adversaries if deterrence fails. We will concentrate our efforts in two areas. First, in our ability to fight today, and second, in our ability to fight in the future. Through our current and future investments, the Department aims to establish a balance of high and low mix of combat capabilities optimized to project power both from within and outside the adversary's threat environment. The Department of the Air Force is also looking to streamline our forces whenever possible. This includes finding creative ways to remove excess infrastructure and retire obsolete inventory. We also recognize our need and responsibility to pass an audit as soon as possible, and we are working to make that a reality. The Department of the Air Force is extremely proud of all of our airmen and guardians defending our great nation and its interest every hour of every day. We commit to working with this committee to secure the FY26 budget request, which will directly support our airmen and guardians in their uncompromising mission. We thank you for your time and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General Saltzman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for your continued support and for the opportunity to testify on the Space Force's posture for FY26. Never before in our history has space been more critical to the future of our nation. No more than ever, satellites underpin our economic prosperity, enabling everything from transportation, communication, to agriculture and finance. Space has likewise become the backbone of national security, and today's joint force is built around the assumption that space power will be there when needed. GPS allows our forces to mass and maneuver fires with unprecedented accuracy and efficiency. Satellite communications ensure command and control of operations around the world in real time, and today's cutting-edge satellites provide the warfighter with constant and detailed battlefield awareness, alerting America's forces of missile launches and threatening adversarial activity. All of these effects and more are provided by your Space Force. At a cost of only about 3% of the larger DoD budget and with less than 1% of the personnel, there's no question our nation's Space Force is a great value proposition for the Department and an indispensable national asset for modern power projection. It is imperative that we match the dramatic rise in threats and increasing importance of space with resources to arm the Space Force effectively. The Space Force has been asked to accept new responsibilities and new missions. These new missions require new resources, or we will face tough choices between delayed readiness, reduced capacity, or unaddressed vulnerabilities. To illustrate my point, in the past 3 years, the Space Force has been asked to take on critical new missions like ground and air-moving target indications, adding new space control capabilities, advanced training requirements, and a threefold increase in launch tempo at our national spaceports. The most recent addition to our mission set is the space-based technology associated with the Golden Dome program. These are not modernization efforts or shifts from legacy mission. They represent new requirements for missions that have never been accomplished by a military space organization. By FY26, we will have laid the foundational groundwork to continue these efforts in earnest. Our acquisition efforts are fully leveraging expanded authorities, enhanced contracting mechanisms, and new processes like the software acquisition pathway. If the resources are made available, the Space Force will be postured to use them effectively in pursuit of these critical priority missions at a time of increasing adversarial challenges in the space domain. To be successful in our expanding mission portfolio, we must be able to control the space domain, protecting our capabilities in space while denying an adversary the ability to use space against us. In pursuit of our critical missions, Space Force priorities have remained consistent. Build comprehensive domain awareness, deploy resilient mission architectures, and develop the capacity to hold an adversary's space assets at risk. To that end, we are developing cutting-edge sensors and networks to provide critical information to decision makers. We are bolstering our launch infrastructure and deployed proliferated constellations that are more resilient to attack. We are developing a host of innovative means to protect our satellites and networks. And we are investing in robust counter-space systems to defeat space-enabled threats to our forces and to our homeland. Driving a cultural change to increase the speed and effectiveness of acquiring these new systems will be critical to our success. In fact, this is part of the Guardian DNA, since improving acquisition was a driving force behind the creation of the Space Force from day one. Our acquisition professionals understand the unique needs of the warfighter, and these Guardians have driven efficiencies across all mission areas, saving hundreds of millions of dollars on launch services, leveraging novel contracting authorities to shave months off contracting timelines, and setting a new record for tactically responsive space just last year. All this while embracing a number of changes to our institutional culture to support improved acquisition, readiness, and sustainment, including standing up integrated units with sustainment and operations side by side, and establishing enhanced acquisition training at all levels to ensure a firm understanding of how acquisitions and operations combine to create combat-ready forces. We must institutionalize these early wins to ensure the complex ecosystems of acquisition, budget, and requirements continues to rapidly produce the equipment our warfighters need to win in space. Today, with your support, our nation's Guardians are poised to ensure we maintain our national advantage in space. So again, thank you to the committee for providing the support to make these successes possible, and I thank you for the opportunity to highlight the tremendous work that our Guardians are doing to secure our nation's interests in, from, and to space. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Saltzman. General Alvin, you're recognized.
Good morning, Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, and distinguished members of this committee. I'm proud to represent the 677,000 total force airmen serving our nation. Thank you for your support, not only to those airmen, but to their families as well. I'd like to open by expressing my immense pride in the exemplary performance of our airmen in securing our homeland and deployed worldwide. From the Indo-Pacific to the Middle East to our southern border, they are working around the clock to deliver air power anytime, anywhere. The strategic landscape has shifted dramatically. We now operate in a world where the PRC is not only rapidly modernizing its military, but is doing so with a clear intent to coerce its neighbors and reshape the international order, to include a PRC nuclear breakout that demands unmatched deterrence capabilities. In parallel, we're seeing unprecedented threats to our homeland. Our mission is clear: maintain air power dominance and safeguard our security, deter aggression, and prevail in conflict. To achieve peace through strength, we must adapt and evolve. Reinforced by our most recent interim National Defense Strategic Guidance, our Air Force has three enduring priorities. First, we must defend the homeland. Air and missile threats are evolving in both speed and sophistication, and the ability to detect, track, and defeat those threats in real time is foundational to our national defense and is non-negotiable. Simultaneously, the United States Air Force provides reliable, effective, and safe nuclear deterrent that is the backbone of strategic stability. These priorities are paramount, cannot fail, and must be given equal weight. Finally, we must project power globally, either independently or as part of the joint force, to rapidly respond anywhere to deter aggression and win. This is what makes our Air Force unique, and it is needed now more than ever. To achieve these priorities, we are asking for sustained support for modernization and the development of new capabilities. The FY26 budget request is designed to build a force aligned with today's operational realities. This means preserving current readiness and optimizing our force tailored to design for contested environments, one that blends next-generation aircraft, autonomous systems, and resilient command and control. Our modernization efforts to rebuild our military include the continued development of the F-47, the integration of collaborative combat aircraft, and other possibilities to expand combat mass at lower cost. We're also upgrading the F-35 and F-15. These platforms are critical to retain the edge our warfighters need. At the same time, we are recapitalizing aging fleets, essential for maintaining power projection in the interim. Our investment in nuclear modernization remains a top priority, with funding directed towards Sentinel program, B-21 radar, and the revitalized B-52 fleet. These systems will anchor our strategic deterrent for decades to come. Equally important is the investment in our airmen. We are enhancing recruiting, expanding training opportunities, and strengthening family support structures. We suffered a recruiting setback due to the year-long continuing resolution and subsequent reduction of nearly $500 million in our military personnel account. This will result in our inability to fund the recruitment of 3,000 Americans who want to join our Air Force. Furthermore, the reduced FY25 budget, triggered by the continuing resolution, led to a decrease in facilities, sustainment, restoration, and modernization by $642 million, directly affecting our airmen's quality of life. We must find a better way. Investing in our airmen means ruthlessly prioritizing in the right capabilities and projects while divesting from aging systems and unused infrastructure. In January 2025, we reported 23% in excess facilities and 60% in excess parking aprons and ramps. This inefficient laydown of force structure across our installations suggests there are opportunities for consolidation, innovation, or to divest and focus our limited resources where they are most needed. With your support, we will focus on utilizing existing authorities to reduce infrastructure, identify cost reduction and revenue-generating opportunities, and right-size our infrastructure to achieve long-term efficiencies. We don't just need more Air Force. We need a more capable one. We need more tooth, less tail, a force that can deliver rapid, decisive blows and reposition quickly. That means investing in platforms and people that enhance our warfighting capacity. More means more options for our nation. Enhanced homeland defense, strengthened deterrence, and unmatched power projection. One strategically postured to deny adversaries. No other service can match what the Air Force delivers. Effects anywhere on the globe, at any scale, on minimal notice. Our airmen are the best in the world, ready to win today and build the enduring force for tomorrow. With your support, we can ensure the Air Force remains the cornerstone of American power through the 21st century. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Alvin. Thank all of you. I'd like to recognize myself first for questions. Mr. Secretary, as the Space Force works to develop the culture of warfighting in space, I want to make sure that we aren't leaving behind our acquisition guardians. General Saltzman and I have talked about this at length. Can I get your commitment to make sure that we aren't going to see their promotion rates falling behind the average promotion rates of Space Force officers and other categories?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I commit to that.
Thank you. And as you are probably aware, I hope you're aware that our current defense, and some of you have referenced this, our current defense acquisition system is failing us. The ranking member and I have made it our focus this year to address that. What specific authorities or support can we provide you to fix this?
I think you actually you highlighted right away with making sure that we have the right workforce and promoting the right officers within the acquisition workforce. The experience I've had is if you don't have the right team, the right experienced and educated team, you're that can structure the program well and execute the program. No matter what else you do, you're not going to be successful. So that's a starting. And then you have to give the team the authorities, right, all the way from being able to manage, maybe not at the high level, but the lower level requirements, the funding, all the LODs that go into delivering these systems. You have to make sure that they have that authority to do so, and to be able to have that authority that they execute quickly and in a streamlined fashion. I think it's one of the problems that we have is in many cases, technically we have a lot of authorities to do these things. It's just there's so much bureaucracy tied up in them that it takes too long. So those are the kind of things.
That's what we're trying to weed out. So if your staff is already not doing so, I hope that they will stay in touch with the HAS staff and the SAS staff, because this is not just bipartisan, this is bicameral, and make sure that the language we're putting in this year's NDAA gets after the problems you just described, because we're all going to have to live with what we enact this year.
And
go ahead,
Chairman. I would be happy to personally sit down and walk through that with you if you're interested.
Well, we look forward to that. And also, it's my understanding that our newest KC-46s are coming off the line hovering at a fully mission capability rate of only 60%. We talked a little bit about this in the SCIF yesterday. I just urge you to get after that. 60% is not acceptable. You made reference to, and it's accurate, that China's defense budget has doubled in recent years. In fact, I think it was General Alvin that brought this up. We have got to address our defense spending in this country. We are at the lowest level of defense spending as a percentage of GDP since before World War II. And it's unacceptable. We're going to have to deal with it. The president has set the goal. He went over to Europe and told every member of NATO that we all need to be getting to 5% of GDP in defense spending. I fully agree with him. General Saltzman talked about the need for his department to have budget relief, as did General Alvin. We can't do it at the current rates. This reconciliation bill is going to be a nice bump, a one-year bump, but to get after the issues we talked about in our opening statements and that y'all just described is going to require sustained increases in defense spending, and I assure you that we're working to try to get there, but it's going to be important that you continue to talk about it. The fact is, the public doesn't just need to hear from the president and us. You need to be talking about it because you're the tip of the spear, and they need to hear from you what the challenges are for you to meet the threats given the constraints of your fiscal support at this point in time. So with that, I will yield to the ranking member for any questions he may have.
Thank you. Excuse me, just curious. It's been a lot in the news, Ukraine's drone strikes, their effectiveness, ability, basically tiny, cheap drones taking $1 billion worth of big, heavy equipment. How has that has it changed your thinking at all about what our needs are going forward in terms of having more of those cheaper, attritable unmanned systems and also the vulnerabilities of some of the larger systems that we're building? How does that change your planning going forward? Or is the Ukraine-Russia war sort of unique and not applicable to some of these other lessons?
I can start, Congressman, and then turn it over to General Alvin. But to be honest, I don't think it changed my opinion at all. I've been very, very concerned with that threat for years now. We've seen it within the U.S. against many of our installations and our inability to deal with those. Actually, probably lower threat than obviously what happened within Russia. But that's been an ongoing threat that I think we've been thinking about for a long time. And it's going to take a whole-of-government approach to deal with in the U.S. It's very difficult to defend against that sort of thing if you're restricted to only operating within the geography of your base. I think we have to work with the whole of government to make sure that we have an approach to deal with that threat, because it is huge.
Specific on that in terms of this is a system that we've been looking at that we desperately need now because of that, whereas maybe we shouldn't build all of this because it's really expensive and really vulnerable.
If I could, I'll turn to General Alvin, maybe take a couple of those.
Thanks. And Congressman, you make the right point where we shouldn't learn too much and we shouldn't ignore what happened in Ukraine, because there are geography dependent, context dependent. But I would say that when something like this happens, it turns the idea of small and less expensive capabilities from an academic conversation to a real conversation, because we've seen it. And so understanding the context that made it successful and those which might be limitations is important. But to Secretary Meng's point, we sort of always knew this in the back of our mind. So when we're looking at it from two directions, first of all, to your point of where are our exquisite systems and what are the vulnerabilities we hadn't considered before, and which might be most vulnerable to those that might have to cross an ocean and part of our continent rather than just the geography of Central Europe. Understanding those nuances, but understanding also that there are the more sophisticated and dependent we are on those exquisite capabilities, the higher level of defense we need to have for them. The flip side that I like to bring up is something that solves another problem. When we see how effective these can be, we need to think about putting them into our offensive arsenal. And that's what we're looking at the United States Air Force as our change and our new force design understands this sort of range of capabilities to include those when they can be responsive at low cost and be disruptive. So there's an offensive thing we need to consider on this as well.
Somewhat connected to that is the whole Golden Dome concept, and I have a number of different concerns about it. It reminds me vaguely of the future combat systems that the Army cranked up 30 years ago, where it was like, we know we got to do a lot, so let's just put a name on it and say we're going to do everything, and it's all going to work. It was a complete disaster. And the Golden Dome idea that there's one system that's going to protect everyone, it is a lot more complicated than that. So I don't have that much time, so I'm going to put both my questions at you and then see. So number one, are we really going to make smart investments about systems that have real-world application as opposed to engaging in some fantasy about some perfect system? How much money could we potentially waste on that? And number two, I haven't seen anybody in the White House or around this system, talking about the implications in terms of how destabilizing it can be in the long-running understanding of how to prevent nuclear war, which is that it's not winnable. Both sides need to be vulnerable. If the message starts to get out there, we're going to build a golden dome so we can be protected and we might win, that can be incredibly destabilizing. Now, there's probably ways to manage it, but the fact that nobody working on this is even talking about what we say to the Russians and the Chinese about this is a little bit concerning. So in 44 seconds, can you hit those 2 points?
Congressman, I'll do my best. To the first part, about the capabilities, I think I have confidence that, at least in the air domain, in the United States Air Force, the capabilities that we imagine will be integrated as part of the Golden Dome are not just bespoke boutique capabilities for that. Domain awareness, the ability to intercept hypersonics and cruise missiles and those sort of things, those are applicable globally. So we will ensure
that's what it better be. I'm not confident that we're there. We better take a look at it just quickly.
Yeah. On the other, the strategic stability, right. Congressman, very quickly, I would say what we need to focus on as a nation is re-getting our intellectual capacity to understand strategic deterrence in now, like we did in the Cold War, but understand it now with three capables, which is different. It's not just an algebra equation. It's different when you have three great powers or aspiring great powers with nuclear capabilities. It's a different equation we need to sort out to understand the risks.
Absolutely. I just hope we seriously consider it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, not California. Wouldn't do that to you. South Carolina, Joe Wilson.
And thank you, Chairman Mike Rogers, for your proven leadership, positive leadership, in correcting states correctly, too. Okay. We appreciate all of your service and for a strong America, for peace through strength. We're in a Cold War we didn't choose, between dictators with rule of gun invading democracies with rule of law. War criminal Putin and the Chinese Communist Party continue to expand and modernize their capabilities and rapidly expand, while we're forced to react to changes in the battlefield. President Donald Trump is correct. Iran must not have a nuclear bomb to achieve their goal of death to Israel and death to America. The U.S. must remain ahead of our adversaries to ensure we do not fall behind, again, to maintain peace through strength. With that in mind, Secretary Mink, we are really grateful that the courageous patriots of Ukraine caused devastating, historic damage to Russia's strategic bombers with a sophisticated drone attack. Ranking Member Smith is correct, as he just recognized bipartisan support of our Ukrainian allies and the courage of the people of Ukraine. With that in mind, ever since war criminal Putin has invaded Ukraine, we're seeing drones take a larger role in conventional warfare. The most recent attack once again demonstrates the damage that low-cost weapon systems can have to a battlefield. Does the Air Force currently possess the capability to protect its bases from such attacks in the United States and abroad? If not, what is the Air Force doing to ensure that we're able to counter these threats in a timely manner?
So I think currently it's very challenging. I think, as I mentioned, we have a technical challenge that we're addressing as quickly as we can with counter drone capability. But I also think there is basically an operating conditions challenge that we have and it really is going to require a whole of government. As I mentioned, trying to defend against that sort of attack when we're limited to just operating within our geographic constraint of our base is very challenging. You have to be able to address these issues in a much broader perspective, working with FAA, local law enforcement. That all has to be addressed, or I think we're going to continue to be very, very challenged to address that threat within the U.S. or overseas.
I can see the challenge. I grew up in the holy city of Charleston, and so you have the Air Force Base and the civilian air base, airport next door. Good luck. Also, Mr. Secretary, the United States is known to have the most powerful Air Force in the world. However, we can't take for granted our adversaries, especially China, as they continue to modernize. And I especially appreciate the issue, as my father served in the 14th Air Force, the Flying Tigers, in China during World War II, Kunming, Chengdu, Xi'an. Does the U.S. currently have the capability to deter our enemies on multiple fronts simultaneously?
Congressman, I'll take a shot at that. I certainly, as we look to size our Air Force, we also need to look at shaping it. To your point of being able to project power anytime, anywhere, and be able to deter, we have, within the limited capacity, we have a range of capabilities from high end to low end. And as I mentioned about our reimagination of our force design, understanding, we're learning from things in the Middle East that we're seeing that there are low-cost capabilities. We are starting to develop some low-cost capabilities of our own, so we're not on the wrong side of the cost curve when we're engaging with the Houthis and et cetera, et cetera. So as we do that, we are preserving the force for the most pacing threat that our national defense strategy has basically set over the past near decade, for the pacing threat of China. However, we retain, through our capacity and capabilities and our interactions with our allies and partners, the ability to deter across the rest of the world.
And General, in regard to the A-10 fleet, we see that they're getting ready to be retired. But they've been so successful and important. Is there any way that instead of retiring them, that we could provide them to our allies, such as Jordan, to deter aggression?
The challenge with that, Congressman, is the cost. It seems like it's cheap. It's not cheap. You have to have the ability to maintain them, the depot structure to sustain them, the pilot training institutional. The actual overall cost versus the value is more expensive than our allies could really afford or want to pay. And for us, we can't afford it within our budget to be able to privilege the higher end capabilities we need against the pacing threat.
Well, we have your trust in what you're doing, but any way we can protect our allies, such as Jordan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Secretary May, congratulations on your recent confirmation. As Secretary of the Air Force, you oversee 2/3 of the nuclear triad as well as the Space Force. So I just want to pick up on some of the questions from the ranking member about the implications strategically for Golden Dome. There are a lot of things that are parts of Golden Dome that we clearly need to do. The Ukrainian attack on the Russian bomber fleet highlighted the vulnerability of bases, and that's a vulnerability we face as well, and you said that we've been working on addressing it. There's also bipartisan agreement on the need for better domain awareness, so that if we get attacked by hypersonics or other missiles coming our way, we know in time to respond. Both of these things would increase strategic stability, because we and our adversaries know that our nuclear deterrent is safe, reliable, and effective. So in other words, if they attack us, we'll know they're attacking, and we will be able to respond. And what establishes strategic stability for the world and has prevented a nuclear exchange for 70 years is the fact that both sides know that. So how do you expect Russia and China to respond to the idea that their nuclear deterrent is not effective because Golden Dome will shoot down all their incoming missiles?
Thanks for the question, Congressman. That when we go to deterrence, you're exactly right. This is something started with MAD many years ago, mutually assured destruction. I think the world we're in right now is a little bit different. You have that high level strategic deterrence you need to do, but there's also a significant threat of a smaller scale attack. That is less than a full-up strategic kind of engagement, but is still...
I agree, but my question is,
so
how do you expect Russia and China to respond to the idea, as the President has stated, that we will shoot down all of their incoming missiles?
Well, I would hope that the response would be that they would be more open to negotiation to ensure that those engagements never happen in the first place. In the end, peace through strength, right? Make sure that we can protect ourselves, and then it opens a lot more opportunity for negotiation.
Well,
that's
Mr.
my
Secretary,
perspective, right?
Mr. Secretary, hope is not a strategy, and it would be helpful to know if we're going to spend what the CBO estimates could be about $500 billion taxpayer dollars, that we understand how our adversaries are going to respond. Because a more logical response would be for them to develop ways to get around Golden Dome. That's exactly what they've done ever since President Bush pulled out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty in the early 2000s. That's why they've developed hypersonics, to get around those defensive capabilities. So if we're going to put something up in the sky for $500 billion, and it just starts an arms race, and then it doesn't work because they can get around it, then that's a massive waste of taxpayer dollars. But even more concerning it decreases strategic stability and it makes it more likely we have a nuclear exchange. But what is the administration doing to just to develop a philosophy, a plan, a strategy for how this thing is going to work? The enemy gets a vote here.
The enemy does get a vote, and I would say two things. First off, there's been an arms race ongoing already. To be honest, what we're doing is responding to the arms race, both from the space perspective, not just from the nuclear perspective, but from the counter space control perspective. The U.S. has actually sat idle for quite some time and allowed the Chinese to make huge advances and really, in some cases, gain the high ground in that area. So sitting back and not doing what's necessary to defend ourselves has not worked.
Mr. Secretary, the high ground in what area?
Well, actually, unfortunately, Congressman, they've made significant advances both in space, air, maritime, across the board. They've made significant advances.
Where have they made the most advances? Sort of percentage-wise, where have they increased their capabilities the most?
I think their fielding of their space systems.
I would agree.
System, but I wouldn't underestimate.
Mr. Secretary, I'm running out of time, but I agree that space is where they've expanded the most. So why are you cutting the space budget? Why are you cutting our space budget?
So the final total budgets have not been released, but we've
never gotten budgets later in history.
And talk about it.
But what we know right now is the space budget is going to be cut. So you have no theory for how Golden Dome is going to work, but we're doing it because China is increasing in space, and you plan to cut the space budget. That doesn't sound like a good plan, Mr.
I think we have some pretty good ideas of how Golden Dome would be developed, and I think
we'd like to hear those ideas.
Here now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank our witnesses for joining us. General Saltzman, I was really encouraged by our conversations yesterday, and I'm glad that you share my sense that we need extensive launch capability across all the different spectrums, especially small and medium launch. We know that we're quickly getting to capacity there at Canaveral and there in California. We want to make sure that we're using the other areas to the same extent that we're using Vandenberg and Canaveral. From your perspective, give me your thoughts about the value of small and medium launch capability, especially in the context of the National Security Space Launch Program, Phase 3, Lane 1, and the Rocket Systems Launch Program, all of those integrated to make sure we continue to build that capacity. We are still ahead of the Chinese there, but we know what they're doing to quickly catch up. Our existing facilities are getting at capacity pretty quickly.
Thank you, sir. I agree with you completely. Capacity is an important issue with regards to our launch infrastructure. If we're going to continue on the pace of growth that we've seen over the last few years, we're going to have to increase that capacity. With regards to small and medium launch capabilities, this is an important area in terms of putting up experimentation, putting up prototypes, putting up demonstrations. This is all a campaign that reduces risk in programs, that matures technology. And rather than a large satellite or a large investment with a high-end satellite, the ability to test payloads at smaller scale using small and medium launch will be important going forward.
Well, I'd like to formally invite you to join Representative Kiggins and myself at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Launch Facility there. I hope that your staff will work with ours to set a date for us to go there and visit and continue this conversation. I think it's incredibly important. I also want to talk about the Space Force's effort to have a tactically responsive space mission. I mean, we talk about the threats in space. Those continue to grow. We have to be able to do the launch of a satellite in 24-hour scenario, and that requires things across the spectrum. I think capacity at our launch facilities and the cadence that they can provide is there. The challenge is how do we bring our partners in that produce the space launch platforms, the constellations, the interfaces, those kinds of things. So wanted to get your perspective. We know we have the CASTR program that has now been ramped up to where we can use existing assets in space, but there are going to be instances where our adversaries are going to look to take out key assets, and we can't find layering opportunities there. We're going to have to be able to launch literally on a moment's notice. I'm interested in your thoughts about how can we leverage commercial space launch capabilities, not just the launch itself, but also the interfaces and the satellites to go along with it. And can we use that capacity for test and training activities that can actually provide us opportunities to exercise and develop a capability, if necessary, to go at a moment's notice?
Thank you, sir. Thanks for that question, because I agree completely. First, I'm very proud of what our acquisition corps has been able to do in terms of reducing the timeline associated with what we're calling tactically responsive space. We were able to take a satellite from a warehouse and put it on orbit and operationalize in less than 90 hours. We were going to beat the 24-hour launch order to orbit. 3 hours of weather kind of got in the way. We did it in 27 hours. We really reduced all of those to really provide a real capability. Your point about test and training is spot on, sir. The ability to buy capability, and maybe it's there for an insurance policy, but because we can't just pay hundreds of millions of dollars for an insurance policy, to use it on a routine basis to add test and training capability on orbit, and then replenish that with the next reserve launch capability, I think is a good strategy that we're exploring.
Very good. Thank you. General Alvin, you have a pretty complex calculus problem in front of you to go ahead and modernize tactical aircraft, strategic aircraft, all the different elements there, modernizing our nuclear deterrent, both aircraft and with missile platforms. Give me your perspective on how do you do that? How do you do that too in a realm where there may be a little infusion of resources, but if you look longer down the road, we're going to have to find ways, I think, internally to make best use of the resources that we already have. And then you talked a little bit about maybe redirecting resources and being able to maximize the efficiency of what happens within the Air Force structure. So just give me a quick viewpoint on that.
Thank you, Congressman. I say very quickly, it's two parts.
Yeah.
The first of all is do what we have been doing more recently, which is more clearly articulating what we think the value of air power is to the nation.
Yeah.
And that lets the Department, the President, and the Congress decide how much Air Force that they're willing to resource. So we want to prove that. But the other part is internally, we're making sure every dollar goes to the maximum lethality, but also solving for agility, not putting ourselves into capital investments that we won't be able to adapt to the future, ingest disruptive technologies, et cetera, et cetera.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Houlihan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to do my very best to ask two pretty wonky questions in my 5 minutes. I was in the Air Force as an acquisition officer, and in keeping with this committee's emphasis on procurement and acquisition modernization, Mr. Secretary, my first question is to you. We've long been supportive on this committee of the Air Force's innovation efforts, particularly through AFWorks and the Agility Prime program. I'm concerned by very recent reports that the vertical takeoff and landing, or VTOL, portfolio is being descoped and terminated, not due to contractor performance, but because of budget constraints and contracting shortfalls. These actions are obviously very risky because they waste taxpayer dollars and private sector dollars, and they also delay or derail capabilities that our military urgently needs. So my first question, and there are many, is are there any transition plans in place to ensure that there would be continuity or orderly transition of the contract that's being administered by AFWorks and VTOL contracts? Is there a standard transition protocol that you're aware of?
I'm not aware. Congressman, General Alvin, are you aware of that issue?
Congresswoman, one of the reasons why we looked to descope is, again, with the limited capacity budget, we're looking to find ones who did have a transition partner. So it's really about making sure we look at the force design and see how these capabilities can find their way into actually delivering capability to the warfighter. And so as we look at that, we are transforming our organizational structure to move towards a more integrated capability command that can take those great innovative ideas, but be able to see more clearly their value proposition.
So I appreciate that, and this is where I'm trying to tease this out. When I was a while ago looking at my phone and realizing all of a sudden there was a capability to text or voice to text, my first thoughts were, why would I ever need that? I think the problem that I'm struggling with right now is that these are technological ideas and innovations that don't necessarily have a natural transition, because why would I ever need such a thing? I think that that's our problem in acquisition, is that we're not being innovative enough, and we're looking for traditional pathways that we used to have in acquisitions rather than being thoughtful about our transitions.
I think that's correct, and it's also a matter of those are the art of the possible that are always competing with the art of the known with respect to the readiness and the modernization challenges that we know of. So that's a constant tension that we have. But I take your point that we don't want to pass opportunities up just by focusing on the known risks.
I would love to continue to follow up with you on this. I also have understood that there is conversation or report suggesting that the Air Force doesn't have enough people to manage these kinds of contracts. Is this something that's true? What is the basis if that's true for this shortage? Is this happening because of DOGE cuts or perhaps early retirements or resignations, or perhaps in my case because we didn't see a pathway for promotion?
So I may jump in there. I don't think it's a numbers games, Congresswoman. I think it's what you hit on the end. I think we need to make sure that we are training and properly incentivizing the acquisition workforce to ensure that we have that skill mix from the very entry level all the way up through the senior general officers. And that is something I will be focusing on because, back to my earlier comment, is the most important thing in acquisition. I'd love to talk more about it, Congresswoman, but the most important thing in acquisition is have a skilled, well-educated team. Otherwise, you have no hope. And it's not just innovation. We have to be innovative, but we also have to innovate faster than our potential adversary, and they're innovating very fast. So it's a combination of just innovation, but you have to innovate quickly.
And in the interest
need a team to do that.
of the time that I have, the other thing that I remember very acutely is that this is not just a force of uniformed personnel. There's a significant force of civilian personnel as well that we rely upon. And my real concern is that we're doging these people without understanding why they're important, because they are critical to our mission.
I came through, most of my career has been as a civilian acquisition person in both the IC and the DoD, so I agree with you, Congresswoman, and that will be a priority too, not only in the military side of the house, but in the civilian side of the house to make sure we're recruiting, and quality of service, that's key too, not just quality of life, quality of service across the board.
Yes, and I only have 30 seconds left, so I probably will submit the bulk of this question for the record. But my other concern is with the Space Force, General, whether or not we're continuing to be very thoughtful of taking advantage of commercial capabilities that are already available to us rather than reinventing them. I remember the not invented here problem and would love to make sure that I follow up with you on that concern as well. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe Saltzman, thank you for your leadership, not just for the amazing way in which you are rising to the threats that we are facing, but also your leadership in shaping the organization that is new and is rising to the needs that we have. The topic I'm going to discuss with you is not going to be a surprise to you, and that is what I believe is the Cuban Missile Crisis in space, and that the fact that we are facing the prospects that Russia might place in space an anti-satellite nuclear weapon. Secretary General of NATO, Rutte, recently just said that as early as this year, Russia might place an anti-satellite nuclear weapon in space. I believe, as do many on this committee, that anti-satellite nuclear weapon should never be permitted to be put in space. You, I believe, coined the best phrase ever, and that was, you said, if that went into space, it would be day zero. And many people think of that if an anti-satellite nuclear weapon was in space and was detonated, that would be day zero. But you identified it being placed in space as day zero because you said that would be the day from which we would no longer be able to depend on space, because the very next day it would be irresponsible to depend on space, because if it was detonated, as Dr. Plum has said here, that it would wipe out everything in low Earth orbit, and low Earth orbit would be uninhabitable for up to a year. And it would take trillions of dollars in technology that we don't have in order to be able to respond to that loss. So, since this is a budgetary hearing, Jill Saltzman, if that day zero happened, how would it affect your budget, the budget of DOD, the budget of the Air Force, if we were at day zero and that anti-satellite nuclear weapon was permitted to be in space and we had to suddenly face that it would be irresponsible to count on space the next day?
Well, thank you for that. And obviously, I agree with you that this is a tremendous threat that we have to think through in terms of contingency planning. A detonation on orbit would be catastrophic across a number of mission areas. It would foul the domain. It would foul certainly low Earth orbit and potentially middle Earth orbit for an extended period of time. So it would make replenishment and reconstitution extremely difficult. It would put at risk the lives of the astronauts that are currently on orbit. Catastrophic. And so when you ask me how would it affect our budget, if this came to pass and it became a real threat that we had to invest in to mitigate, we've run some basic numbers in terms of trying to harden satellites and trying to position them in a way so that there's redundancies. Should we lose any portion of the constellation, will we have redundancies? And I can't get to a cost reasonable number to say with $3 trillion I can fix this. I just can't come up with a reasonable number. And so that's why I tried. I'm trying not to be too alarmist, but day zero really is that. We just can't count on space because I don't know how to create the replenishment and the reconstitution to overcome that kind of a detonation.
It should never be permitted to be placed in space. General Saltzman, thank you for the clarity of your description of the threat if that is in space. Mr. Secretary, you have some of our most important advances that need to be made for our being able to address the advances that our adversaries have made. You have missile defense, you have hypersonics, you have nuclear deterrence, you have our new advances in weapon systems, you have our advances in air, both manned and unmanned systems. Our adversaries are currently doing some things that we can't do, and you are the one who's supposed to close that gap. CRs have an impact on that. How are you going to close the gap, and could you please give a commercial as to why Congress should stop giving you the impediment of continuing resolutions that affect your ability to close that gap?
Continuing resolutions are very, very challenging. They have implications, as was mentioned, just from a personnel perspective. The personnel budget, it has also a significant, in some ways, an outweighed effect on acquisitions. How you do acquisitions, how you start new, how you be innovative, as our last discussion, is heavily affected by particularly with the year-long CR. It stops a lot of that, or at the very least makes it much more challenging to get approved. So yes, it has a huge impact on our ability to innovate and innovate quickly, as well as making sure we have the personnel that can execute those programs. The Chinese have made, I'd be happy to talk about it in a different form in more detail, but they've made phenomenal advancements.
Gentleman's
we
time
have to be
expired. Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for your testimony today. Again, at the outset, I just want to associate myself with the remarks of the chair and ranking member about the lateness of the budget. We're less than 4 months away from the start of the fiscal year, and we're now being told that the actual budget document won't be over here until the end of the month, last week of the month. I certainly agree with Mr. Turner about the harm of CRs and the testimony of the Secretary, but having a delivery date of the budget with less than 3 months to go before the start of the fiscal year, I think this process is doomed in terms of trying to avoid a CR. This place is not a rubber stamp. Article 1 of the Constitution makes it pretty clear who's the decision maker in terms of both appropriations and authorizations, and the lateness of the delivery of the budget is the real impediment that we're facing right now. So again, the sooner the better in terms of it coming over. On page 11 of your testimony, paragraph special mission aircraft, there's a discussion about the replacement of Air Force One program. Again, I serve on the committee with Mr. Kelly that has jurisdiction over executive airlift. We had a hearing a couple weeks ago where Barbara Costello, the acting assistant secretary of the Air Force, testified that there was actually some progress being made as far as the recapitalization of the 2 aircraft that were purchased back in 2018. And she actually talked about possible delivery date sometime during the calendar year of 2027. Mr. Secretary, can you sort of give us your view of that testimony?
Yes, Congressman, we have, and thanks for the question, we have been working closely with the contractor, Boeing in this case, to accelerate that program. As you know, it has experienced significant delays. Is it going to get back into 27? I couldn't guarantee that, Congressman, but we are doing whatever we can to pull it back to, I think it was before they started working to pull it back, it was in the 30s, I believe. So it's tough to do, but we're working with the contractor to pull it back. I think 27 is going to be really tough, though.
Yeah, it was actually 29, I think was the last sort of guesstimate that was there. And certainly, yes, we've been tracking this from day one. Can you give us the cost estimate of the retrofit of the Qatar plane that is all over the news?
I think it would be difficult for me to give you the exact details here, but we'd be actually happy to talk about some of those specifics in a different forum. I think there's been a number thrown around on the order of $1 billion, but a lot of those costs associated with that are costs that we'd have experienced anyway. We will experience them early. Buying additional platforms for training, for spares, things like that are actually the majority of that amount. So it wouldn't be anywhere near that, but we can talk in details about exactly what we're buying in a different form and what the cost drivers are, but it's nowhere near that much.
So I think, it's unfortunate that, again, and when we're hearing about all the challenges the Air Force faces, that what I think is going to be a pretty big ticket item can't be sort of discussed publicly, because I think people need to know that. And I would just say, based on the experience of the 2018 planes, we know that the contract for retrofit was $3.9 billion. Again, some of that was purchase of the planes from Boeing, roughly about $800 million. But again, if you just do the math, it was about $3 billion for retrofit. There's been cost overruns. They had to strip those planes that were built for another purpose down to the studs. And as you said, there's been issues. The contractor who was doing the interior work went out of business, and Boeing has had to kind of figure out a plan to do the fitting out of the interior of the plane. But again, just using that as an extrapolating from that, I mean, it's clear that this new third plane is going to cost well over $1 billion. I mean, it's just, you can't retrofit a plane that's built for another purpose for Air Force One and expect it to be a free plane. You've got to, install encrypted communication technology. You have to harden the defenses. You have to put countermeasures in there. Obviously, you need to have all it's a flying situation room that's there. And the notion that we can't find out when we're about to take up a very difficult budget, and based on the experience we already have gone through with retrofitting planes, 747s, it's clear that this is going to be a drain on the Air Force's budget. And I think that the sooner we just sort of rip the Band-Aid off and get that information out there, it would be helpful for us in terms of deciding whether this is a smart path to go down. With that, go ahead.
Congressman, we'd be happy to come down and talk to you in detail about it in a different environment. Unfortunately, some of the things you're talking about, what those costs are those are classified sensitive capabilities that we put on the platform. So we'd be happy to come down and talk to you about the specifics. But again, I restate that we believe the actual retrofit of that aircraft is actually significant. It's probably less than $400 million to retrofit that aircraft. We'd be happy to come talk to you about it.
Gentleman's time expired. I just want to emphasize a point that Representative Courtney just made, and I'm not blaming you, but Congress is going to decide what we do and don't spend. The administration, OMB in particular, not giving us a budget is not going to compel us to comply with what they give us late. So whoever's listening to this hearing from OMB needs to understand we want to have a healthy dialogue with military professionals like this about what we need to spend to get us where we need to be. We need a budget to help inform that dialogue, but if we don't get it, we're going to ride it without it. We've gotten a skinny budget, which legally allows us to comply with the requirement that we receive a budget. So there's no reason not to get us some information, but I think Mr. Courtney is right, and we all need to acknowledge the fact that being delayed with that presentation is not helpful. With that, I will recognize the gentleman from Tennessee, Dr. Desjardins.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. General Alvin, I appreciate our meeting yesterday and also your comments about doing everything we can to accelerate Sentinel. As I noted to you, and as our Chairman made abundantly clear in his opening statement, I'm concerned that the Air Force's decision to cut funding for FY25 adds risk to the program. the Sentinel program, particularly if we begin FY26 on a continuing resolution. Secretary Mink, I'd like to ask you a question I raised with General Alvin. Will the Air Force be prepared to submit an anomaly request for Sentinel or reprogram additional resources to the program to avoid disruption? Is that something you will consider if the circumstances warrant?
So, Congressman, Sentinel is, if not the #1 priority for me, it is definitely in the top two or three. We will do whatever it takes to deliver that program as quickly as possible. It's nuclear deterrence, it's national security. We will do whatever is necessary to ensure that that program is properly funded. I expect you probably know it's in the middle of a McCurdy, so some of the work has been slowed down, which required a rephasing of the resources. But we are making sure the resources are there and that we are taking the appropriate recommendations out of the McCurdy restructure and move forward with that program. It has my highest priority. It's the thing I've spent the most time on since I've been in this job. It's only been 2.5 weeks, but it is the program I spent the most time on.
Okay, and by the way, congratulations. Wanted to talk just for a second about Arnold Engineering Development Complex. First, General Alvin, I thank you yesterday. I want to thank you again for taking time to meet with the Arnold Community Council from AEDC last month. That visit was deeply appreciated, not just by the local community, but by also the broader Tennessee congressional delegation. And Secretary Mink, we look forward to hosting you at Arnold at your earliest convenience. As you know, Arnold Engineering Development Complex plays a central role in testing for hypersonics, next-generation aircraft, and potentially an expanded mission in the space testing, depending on what happens with the basing decision for Space Command. But based on what we've seen, the current funding model doesn't appear to keep pace with the scale or complexity of those demands. Do you believe there's a need to rethink how we resource and manage test infrastructure like AEDC to ensure it's aligned with the Air Force and the broader mission where it's headed?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman, for that question. I think it's very important, and as I was mentioning before, we need to make sure we're getting every bit of capability out of every dollar we put in to the United States Air Force. And so the manner in which we're sort of reimagining the way we develop capabilities in an integrated fashion, different from the past, where we might look at developing a fighter system and over here a mobility system and here an IT system, looking at it from an entire, we'll call a mission thread, what it takes to do everything from the concept to developing an entire capability. That will allow us to shed more light on some of those critical but maybe not headline-grabbing capabilities, much like AEDC, and those things that require the testing that if you don't fund them, they will find themselves the cause of slowing down of a program. So as we look at it through more of that lens, I think we're going to be able to highlight and advocate more for those critical but less popular parts of the entire capability development portfolio.
And Secretary Mink, did you have anything to add to that?
Just wholehearted agreement that the testing infrastructure across the board is just critical for us to be able to train against the representative threats of what we are almost assuredly going to see overseas.
Well, thank you both for that. And I'll just note for the record that OSD's O&E requirements are placing a real burden on the work being done to modernize Arnold. Director Wilcox, who oversees T&E, has been a strong advocate for Arnold's unique mission, but as far as we're aware, there's no clear path to address this through NDAA, only through OSD's internal policy direction. So I plan to raise this directly with Secretary Hegseth in the coming weeks and hope I can count on your support as we look to accelerate our testing enterprise. And with that, Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Crow.
Thank you, Chairman. General Saltzman, what is your most important asset?
We're talking about the on-orbit capabilities.
I hope you say it's your people.
Well, of course. I mean, there's no doubt that the acquisition and operators and intelligence personnel.
It's the Guardians.
Are the assets.
Do they have a unique skill set and technical capability?
Yes.
Do you rely on a large civilian workforce?
In relative comparison, probably it's about 5,000 civilians in the Space Force of our total less than 15,000.
So about a third, over a third, which is larger proportion than most services.
Yes, sir.
Secretary Mink, would you share that assessment that your most important asset is your people?
Yeah, definitely, Congressman.
and that your people have unique skills and capabilities?
Yes, they do.
And that the civilian workforce is an essential element to your mission?
Yes, across the entire department.
General Saltzman, can you force your civilian workforce to move?
Not most of them.
But Guardians, active duty service members, you can compel to move, but you can't go to a civilian and say you have to relocate, you and your family.
With very few exceptions.
They can leave. They can actually leave employment if you do that.
Correct.
What would happen if you lost half of your civilian workforce for a major unit or capability?
It would. That unit would be underperforming.
Is China moving really fast?
Yes, sir.
Are they moving faster than us in some capability and some technologies?
I don't know how to measure speed of certain capabilities, but they are definitely moving fast in counter space capabilities. For
So if we slowed down one of our capabilities, would that put us at a strategic disadvantage?
I do not want to slow down development of any of our capabilities.
Secretary Mink, U.S. Space Command is headquartered in Colorado. It's at full operational capability, and it relies substantially on a civilian workforce, correct?
That's correct.
Are you familiar with some of the surveys that were done of the civilian workforce that if it were to be moved out of Colorado, a substantial portion of that civilian workforce would refuse to move?
Yes, Congressman, I'm aware that we would have attrition, and it would be very important that we manage that move over a period of time if that occurs.
Would it, with what General Saltzman just said, would it slow us down though relative to the speed of China?
I think it would be our job to do everything we can to ensure that doesn't happen.
Well, of course it would be your job, but it is true those civilian workers, many of whom have said outright they will not move, and that's why it's unacceptable in a very important command and mission that we move it at this time or ever. It's working, it's built out, and we owe it to America and our national security to invest in it in Colorado. And there's a lot of folks in Congress who believe that is an important part of our mission in national defense. General Elvin, to you, are you familiar with our national defense strategy?
I'm familiar with the current one as well as the National Defense Strategic Guidance. Yeah.
And what's the #1 goal of the national defense strategy?
Defend the homeland.
And do we have an integrated, fully capable air defense system that can operate without fixed-wing aircraft to do that job?
Could you repeat the question? Do we have a...
Can we do that without fighter jets in the United States?
Not currently.
No.
Not under the rubric.
In the next 8 years, could we do that without fighter jets?
Hard to predict if we have our collaborative combat aircraft.
It's unlikely, isn't it?
Given our current inventory.
Are you familiar with the commander of NORTHCOM came before this committee and just last year testified that it is essential for his capability to protect the homeland that there be fighter jets in Colorado on mission-ready status to protect the western United States. Are you familiar with that testimony?
I'm not familiar with the testimony, but I trust General Guillot, and I trust that if he said that, he did that under his
predecessor
authority as the responsibility for NORAD NORTHCOM.
Well, I represent Buckley Space Force Base, where that mission is located. There's a F-16 squadron there that actually does that mission of protecting the western United States.
Yes.
There is no integrated, fully capable missile defense system in the United States. We need a plan to recapitalize that fighter wing to keep that capability and protect the homeland. We all want to invest in long-term capabilities, but that is a ways out. We need to make those interim investments today to make sure we can accomplish that mission. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Nebraska, General Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all three of you for being here today. And I enjoyed seeing all three of you at the Air Force Academy graduation. What a moving ceremony. I got to tell you, there's nothing like seeing the graduating class march out on that field with the music. So it was an incredible sight to see. I am concerned about what we're hearing on the President's budget. It appears he's proposing a minor increase for the Air Force and a decrease for the Space Force. If that is true, it's hard to put that up with the fact that we're trying to counter China, because both the Air Force and the Space Force will be front and center in any fight in the Far East. I would anticipate if we were serious about countering China, that we'd be seeing a sizable increase in both the Air Force and the Space Force budgets. I also want to just remind folks in this room and those listening that 20% of the budget that goes to the Air Force and Space Force is pass-through money. It doesn't even go to the Air Force or Space Force. It goes to DoD agencies. So if you look at the share of the pie of what the Air Force and Space Force is getting, it's quite a bit smaller than the Army and the Navy. And I just think we need to readdress this in this committee, but also in the Pentagon. I have my first question is to the Secretary. I really enjoyed chatting with you about the Looking Glass mission. I'm excited that you understand that mission better than most. Could you give us an update with what you know is going on there? For those who aren't familiar, the Looking Glass gives us the capability to command our ICBMs or bombers or submarines if the White House is hit, if the Pentagon's hit, if STRATCOM is hit. We used to have a 24-hour-a-day airborne mission. We stopped doing that when the Cold War ended. However, I think we're going back to the threats where this capability is needed again. And we know the Navy is at some point walking away from this mission. So I'd love to get your update, Mr. Secretary, on this important mission.
If I could, Congressman, I would just say I agree, and thank you for coming out to the Academy graduation. Just under 3 weeks I've been here. That was the funnest thing that I've done, and it's impossible to not get kind of excited when you have 900 cadets.
The keynote speaker must have got you excited.
Come through come up there, also excited. My hand got a little sore after 900 cadets, but it was great. So the back specific to your question, on the Looking Glass, the Air Force is postured to support our role in that, and we will continue to do so. As you've alluded to, there is discussion going on about the future of the mission, and we will continue to participate in that, and we'll take on whatever role that the department assigns to us. General Alvin, if you have anything else.
No, I just and the Navy is agreed to continue that until they're relieved. But when they're relieved, if the mission comes to us, we'll take it. We would ask to be appropriately resourced for it. But as long as that mission is required, we'll ensure that between us and our other services, we're able to support the nation, that critical mission.
Yeah, I submit to you it's critical with the 15-minute warning times with some of the nuclear weapons that Russia and China can deliver here with hypersonics. We need to have the survivable thinking, and it's important for deterrence. They need to know that no matter what they do, they can't decapitate us, that we have the ability to respond. General Alvin, I might point out a two-time classmate with me. The Air Combat Command says we need over 20 Compass Call aircraft, yet the program of record is at 10. Could you give us your mind on what we should be doing with this in the future?
Congressman, and correctly so, we're understanding that, electronic warfare is sort of drifted in the back of our mind, is now back in the front of our mind as we see the criticality of that. The great thing about EA-37 is once we put the operators in the back of them, those things, they are creating new and interesting ways to really put dilemmas in the minds of the enemy. So that the program of record right now is 10, and understand those ACC puts a requirement as higher. This is a matter of resources. Is it this or munitions? Is it this or tankers? Is it this or other things? All of the things we need, but I will tell you, we are understanding how we can squeeze every ounce of capability out of every platform that we get, and they all go into the big prioritization.
General Saltzman, what are the one or two things you think you need to do first to posture the space for the Golden Dome?
Well, I think as we look across the portfolio of things that we already bring to bear, whether it's sensors, whether it's the data networks that have to move the data quickly, the software that enables rapid decision-making, even before we get to the effectors that actually can mitigate the threats, that all has to be stitched together. So we're doing the mission analysis, and I think that's the first thing that has to be done. Which systems are required to put together so we can move data to the right places and most effectively orchestrate a very complex mission set. So we got to do the mission planning first.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I got 1 second left. I'll give it back to the chairman.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New Hampshire, Ms. Goodlander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your testimony at the outset about the importance of an audit. It's something I care about deeply. It's something that's important to my constituents and their public trust in our military. And I wanted to ask you, Mr. Secretary, if you could tell us more about the concrete steps you're taking to ensure that the Department of the Air Force passes a clean audit this fiscal year.
Thanks, Congresswoman. Yeah, we spend quite a bit of money in the military. Want to make sure we are good stewards of the taxpayer and how we do that. My previous job, the organization I worked in, we actually had 16 clean consecutive audits. So I do understand the kind of the steps that and the things that are required to do that. Obviously, this is much larger scale. So I'm in the process of actually assessing where we have our deficiencies and then laying in a plan to go after those. I just signed out a note to put the Undersecretary as one of his primary jobs is to ensure that gets accomplished. But the fundamental thing is,
Mr. Secretary, for identifying those deficiencies.
So those deficiencies, with the past audits have been, many of them have been identified. I think the question is what do you do? What's the as you probably know, Congressman, what do you do to address those deficiencies?
Yes.
Some of them can be very challenging. Some of them is just tying together all the systems that manage the data, manage the finances. Those can be really challenging steps, and so identifying those deficiencies, budgeting to fix those things, right, and get them right is what we're going to be focused on.
Well, would appreciate the chance to hear from you in real time how your progress is going and what this committee can do to support you in that effort. We've got the National Defense Authorization Act, which is one of the reasons I came to this committee. It's knocking on wood, 63 years in running a bill, and we'd very much like to work with you to be sure that you can join our colleagues from the Marine Corps in passing a clean audit as soon as possible. I wanted to also ask you about, another issue that matters a lot to my constituents, the right to repair. Could you tell us a bit about your understanding of what the right to repair means? To me, the notion that our military cannot repair our own equipment and weapon systems and aircraft is an outrage. It's costing us billions and billions of dollars to the taxpayer. It's delaying our military readiness. It's a driver of waste, fraud, and abuse, and we're all very committed to cutting down on waste, fraud, and abuse. So I wanted to ask you, we heard from Secretary Driscoll yesterday about his commitment to ensure that going forward, any contracts and the way that the right to repair is undermined is really through highly obscure and technical provisions in our contracts, that going forward that doesn't continue, and working retroactively. So can you tell us about your efforts on this front?
So first off, as with Secretary Driscoll, I gave you my commitment that this will be something that we will ensure contracts going forward, that we have full flexibility. And I think, as you alluded to, there's a whole spectrum. It can be all the way from the contractor has the full right and authority to do that to, even if they don't, the government doesn't actually have enough of the technical specs to actually do it, so we're still relying upon the contractor. So one of the things I've been doing, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all, because it varies across the different contracts we have within the department, looking into the conditions are different, and we're going to have to go in and address every one of those conditions in a little bit different way. But in the end, we have already made some progress. But in the end, I think we have to get there. There's no question about it. I don't know, General, if you have any other comments on that.
I just totally associate with what the Secretary said. It's some of the contractual pieces that we entered into, the more we can get relief from that, the more flexibility. We're all about that.
Well, I appreciate that, and we want to support you. We've got bipartisan support for provisions in this year's NDAA, and we would love to work with you on that. General Saltzman, I thank you for being here. My home state of New Hampshire is home to the New Boston Space Force Station in Hillsborough County, and I had a chance to visit New Boston. They're providing critical around-the-clock satellite command and control capabilities for our country. I wanted to ask you, I only have 10 seconds left, so maybe we can follow up offline, but I'm eager to talk to you about how we can ensure that our infrastructure installations like the New Boston Space Force Station are protected from the wide range of vulnerabilities that are out there.
Very quickly, we have a
General Lady's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last weekend, I think we saw a pivotal moment in warfare when the Ukrainian army launched an unbelievable attack on the Russian Air Force. But it also, for me, underlined a vulnerability for us For a long time, we've thought, distance was a great equalizer, but now, with the onset of drones, et cetera, you could have malign actors here in the United States take out a lot of our assets in a very short period of time. What are we doing to protect against drones, this kind of activity, to protect our assets here on the homeland? General Alvin.
Thank you, Congressman. And to the conversation we had earlier, it's really it's a joint force problem, and it is one of those that is multifaceted. It is different in characterization than what happened with Russia and Ukraine, but it certainly shows the consequences if we don't pay attention to it. This is one of those where we have to have an understanding of the current restrictions that we have in place with respect to rules of engagements with the local, county, state, federal.
Well, forget that.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have? My concern is the capability of us being able to defend against AI drones. We may have the capability to defend against piloted drones, all right? But I've always been afraid of AI drones that are unpiloted, and that you basically have to knock them out of the sky. You just can't say, okay, you can't pilot anymore, and they fall to the ground. That's not the case anymore. I'm worried about our capabilities there, all right? And that's all I'm going to say. And also, not only for our military, but also on our civilians and our civilian transportation infrastructure. Because if some kind of an attack happens on a civilian aircraft, then basically air travel grinds to a halt. Nobody's going to take a plane. And so I would hope, Secretary, that we're on this, and not only just for protecting our military assets, but also our entire transportation network. So that's all I'm going to say. I really don't want to get into what you're doing, but maybe in a classified setting we would find out what it is we're doing to protect against this threat. I've been really worried about this threat for a really long time, and what happened last weekend just puts an exclamation point on my worry about what's could happen here. Just for the sake, how much does a B-2 bomber cost?
Yeah, I think it's probably, I don't know what the replacement cost would be, but I think originally it's multiple billion.
Are they all clustered around the same place?
Yeah, a lot of them are.
Okay, so one of the things maybe we should be looking at is maybe dispersing our assets, okay, in the near term, until we figure out how we can deal with this. On space, and I think that we do need to enhance our capabilities, but I also think that eventually we're also going to need to develop redundancy to a lack of space. If somebody knocks our space assets out, are we too reliant on space? Do we have redundancy so that we can continue to operate without the space platform? General Saltzman?
No, I don't. I think there are missions we're doing from space that we can't easily just redundantly cover if we were to lose space.
Well, I think if we're too overly reliant on space and we don't have redundancy, we're asking for trouble. Because everything that we can put up can be taken down. And you have to, I kind of believe in Murphy's Law, which doesn't mean that it means that everything that bad can happen will. It just means that anything that can happen will. And so let's not rely too much on space. I'm not saying invest in space, absolutely, okay, and try to defend it as much as we can, but just in case it just get taken out, we can't be helpless as a nation. And so, Secretary Minsk, I'm asking you again, do we have redundancy? Are we developing redundancy to space? Again, that's another question for another time. Are we investing in directed energy?
I think at this level we can say yes, we are investing in directed energy.
Okay, very, very good. And I guess I have 15 seconds left, and I guess my time is up, and I yield back to the chairman. Thank you.
I would follow up, let the gentleman from Florida know that we have been for many years developing directed energy capabilities, and it's maturing at a nice clip. What you just saw happen in Israel with Iron Beam is part of our investments, but yes, and a lot of it, I'd be happy for you to learn more in a skiff, but I'm very proud of that technology, and it's got great potential in the future. With that, the chair, I recognize the gentlelady from Maryland, Ms. Elfreth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, thank you for being here and good morning. I echo the chairs and the concerns you heard from both sides of the aisle of this committee around the lateness of the budget, and particularly Mr. Courtney's concerns around having an open, honest, and transparent conversation about the future of Air Force One. I'm going to start with a local issue and then expand to a national issue. We've talked about A-10s quite a bit. I know that you all talk about the future of A-10s quite a bit in every one of our states, but as you well know, Maryland's National Guard, our 175th wing, is unique. It comprises both the flight component and the cyber component, which I'm very grateful for the expansion of that cyber component. But with the divestment of the A-10s, we'll lose that flight mission, but the cyber component is not yet stood up. And so there's going to be a bit of a gap in our mission, and I would just love some greater clarity. I guess General Alvin, about Cyberwing's expansion. When do you expect the full operational capacity? What's our planning to manage this transition period? I'm giving you all this at once. And then how are we coordinating with Cybercom in particular to properly integrate this expanded wing?
Well, thank you very much, and it truly is a key mission going forward in a growth industry in the cyber wing. So we want to go as fast as we possibly can. So it really is not going to be a gap of sorts. It'll be a gap from full capability to full capability, but we expect the sundowning of the A-10 mission by the end of fiscal year 25, so in about 5 months. But in October is when we start building, and we expect within 36 months of that, we will have an initial operation capability. But in between times, we will slowly be gaining missions. So there will be things we're already be doing, just robusting up in both capacity and sophistication. And then having Fort Meade right up the street is one of those where we're going to be able to leverage that capability to bring that on as fast as possible. One of the advantages is the greatest asset that we have in a cyber wing are the personnel. And so being able to attract that talent in that area is one of the big advantages there. And it also reduces the ability for potential extra MILCON that would go with another platform coming in. So we're going to be aggressively standing up between 1 October 2025, beginning of 26, 36 months later, we're looking to get IOC, and we'd like to get it sooner.
I would like to get it sooner as well. And Mr. Secretary, just following up on that, our air wing in Maryland, we've seen 8 combat deployments in just since 2001, just over 23 years. My Governor Westmore, recently sent you a letter, I believe it was last week, asking for a meeting. I appreciate you've been on the job 2.5 weeks, but to expand in detail on what the General just shared, can I ask for a commitment right now, you and your staff, to meet with my governor and the Maryland delegation to walk through this so we have that seamless transition?
I'd be happy to.
Okay. My staff will follow up with your staff literally as we walk out the door. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for that. Moving on to General Saltzman. Well, actually, to everybody at the panel, I bring this up, I'm a broken record, but I'm really proud that my first CODEL, being a member of Congress, 153 days so far, was actually to Vandenberg, and I greatly enjoyed that experience. It also kind of opened my eyes to physically seeing you have a solar field. You're generating energy at Vandenberg, which is very exciting. We talk about energy resilience and capability, particularly as we're overly relying on 50 states for energy generation and delivery. So you have a solar generating farm, but you have no storage. So it gives me great pause to think about our vulnerabilities, both just from a grid system, but also our vulnerability from foes. Very easy to disrupt readiness capabilities when we don't have energy to and from. So if you could speak specifically to Vandenberg, General, and then Mr. Secretary, your plans to, obviously the low-hanging fruit is a Vandenberg, but I would love to hear your plans on how we're going to make sure our installations are energy independent and resilient as possible from a readiness perspective.
Well, thank you for that, and appreciate you coming out to Vandenberg and taking a look at all the great people and mission they're doing out there. I couldn't agree more that energy resiliency is operational readiness, and especially in the Space Force, where we do most of our missions from our in-base locations. We don't have to deploy to do space operations or launch operations. And so we take it very seriously. We do mission continuity exercises on a routine basis to uncover where the particular shortfalls or vulnerabilities are. We flow those back up to try to make sure we're as resilient as possible. The other initiative that we've taken on is a weapon system infrastructure accounting drill, making sure that when we talk about power generation, it's a part of our readiness account. We haven't traditionally done that. That's not something that other forces have to do to the same degree we do. So we're redesigning how we have transparency of our readiness in that kind of infrastructure. And I think that'll...
Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Luttrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for coming to see us today, and thank you all for your service. Ms. Elfrith and Mr. Wilson actually started this conversation about the A-10s. I think I got lost in space when I was talking. I'm not talking to you when I say that. That the A-10's shelf life is gone, and then we're going to create the next asset. I think that's a horrible idea. I think the A-10 is probably one of the best creations we have. And I've been in the theater of war calling that plane in, and it has saved my life countless times. And there's nothing more terrifying than that flying bathtub with bombs and that gun hanging off the front of it. And I think we're in a bad spot. If we clack off somewhere and we put boots on the ground, that's going to be the asset that we're going to be flying overhead. And I'm not taking anything away from everything else that we have, but I felt like I needed to say that because, again, that plane has saved my life and my teammates' lives more times than I can possibly count. I'm going to shift gears. I'm going to talk hypersonics. Mr. Secretary and Mr. General, you guys can kind of pick which one's going to answer this. I have a list of the weapon assets and the weapon systems that China and Russia have right here. And General, you said rapid modernization, evolving, kind of evolution of technology in the PLA. I think they're there. I mean, I think we're kind of looking at them as that's kind of the bar that's been set. Very focused in on hypersonics. Can you give me a current briefing on where we are and when that capability and that asset will be able to be employed?
I can give you the broad brush at this classification level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir, I understand.
Broad brush, and it's interesting because when you juxtapose, the rapid advance in technology and going to hypersonics, and you compare it to what we all love, which is the A-10. The second question, this is sort of the answer to the first. Those sort of things are making that awesome A-10 less and less survivable. The most important thing for us
I'd agree with
is to
you
ensure
if we had hypersonics that worked.
Well, I would say it's not only hypersonics, it's the other advanced capabilities are going to be more survivable for our boots on the ground in the future, given the enemy capabilities, than the A-10, which we all love. In the element of hypersonics, at this level, I will tell you that we are developing, and you'll see in the budget submission, assuming it's what we had put forward, two different programs. One is a larger form factor that is sort of more strategic long range that we have already tested several times. It's called Arrow, and the other one is HACM. We'll just leave it at there. But there are two systems that are now continuing to develop and moving beyond the RDT and getting into the procurement range in the very near future. And I will be happy to go to higher classification level, the specifics of both of those. But we are accelerating in our development, not only of the technology, but of the procurement of the capabilities that it'll create.
Mr. Secretary, are you having conversations about increasing funding for hypersonic capabilities in the Air Force? Or?
Yeah, fielding those weapon systems, two sides of that coin. First is we really need to, as we've matured the technology, we focused on maturing the technology. Now we need to focus on lowering the costs and getting into production. It's got to be affordable. We've got to be able to buy more than 10 of these things, right? So that's a big focus right now is lowering the production costs. Well, ramping up the production and lowering the costs so we can get enough of that kit to actually make a difference. But yes, on the other side of the house, making sure that once we do kind of get more efficient in production, that we properly fund those programs to deliver that capability. And it's really across the force, not just in the Air Force, but the entire department is looking at these systems. And there's no question the Chinese moved really fast on these capabilities.
General Saltzman, as far as AI capabilities in Space Force, when the current budget plan comes out that we get to see, how are those numbers looking? Are we comfortable in where we sit at this classification level?
Yes, sir. A lot of it is early S&T work that's being done, focusing heavily on decision support kinds of AI, take a lot of data and turn it into decision quality as fast as possible. There's some good returns in the S&T environment, and it's fully funded in support of those efforts.
Okay, and I'll close with this. Mr. Secretary, you and the General answered this, and I know General Ullman would say the same thing, but your most cherished asset is your people, and their health and well-being is everything. And I would ask that you take even if you are an art, take a very hard look currently and as they transition out. Because once they transition out, we get lost in space. And Mr. Secretary, you most likely probably already know that, but the generals, mark my words, okay? So health and welfare of our service members as they transition out, current and transitioning out, please.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Whitesides.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. Mr. Secretary, congratulations on your confirmation. It's good to have someone with your depth of relevant experience leading a military department. I had the opportunity to work with Director Scalise back at NASA, so welcome. I represent the northern side of Los Angeles County, and I want to begin by just thanking your teams for their crucial role in fighting the Los Angeles firestorm in January. Between the Fire Guard data program, firefighting aircraft, and other aspects, we're deeply grateful to your teams. I want to support those efforts going forward as much as I can. I'm also enthusiastic about the possibility of using autonomy in aerial platforms and advanced remote sensing to enable us to more quickly suppress fires that threaten critical installations like the Vandenberg Space Force Base and our home communities. And I'd love to work with your teams to continue to think about that. As you know, I'm proud to represent Plant 42, the home of the B-21 Raider. To me, that program is really a gold standard. It's delivering tremendous capability with an efficient development and manufacturing program. With that said, I want to follow up on a question that Senator Fisher asked this group during the SASC posture hearing late last month. As Senator Fisher noted, General Cotton has recommended that the Air Force procure at least 145 B-21s. Couldn't agree with him more, especially when increasing our total could decrease costs and move the production timeline to the left. Mr. Secretary, you noted to Senator Fisher that you were going to meet with General Cotton and discuss his B-21 requirements. I was just wondering, has that discussion happened? Are there any updates that you might be able to share at this time?
I have not, but I expect to have an opportunity to talk to him next Tuesday, right? Just checking. I have not had that detailed conversation with him, but I will soon. And we are looking very closely at how we increase production just to get to the 100. Right, we want to increase the production rate. That's the program is executing very well. That's really the challenge we have right now is getting the production rate up to deliver the numbers that we'd like, which then gives us the opportunity to increase numbers if we can.
Thanks for that, Mr. Secretary. The committee has had multiple discussions over the past few months about the importance of developing robust space domain awareness, something that I strongly support. Most of my career I've been focused on securing U.S. leadership in space, both from an economic and national security perspective. Remote sensing is central to the fight of the future, and space-based capabilities are critical. That said, as I recently raised with General Guillot and as Representative Jimenez discussed, space-based capabilities cannot be the basket in which we put all of our eggs. We need redundancies across domains. That's underscored by the insatiable appetite for remote sensing information from forward operators. Mr. Secretary, I know you spent much of your incredible career around space assets. Can you give us some reassurance that you'll support an appropriate balance between space, air, and terrestrial-based systems when it comes to remote sensing capabilities?
Yes, Congressman, I can. You can never allow yourself to be put into a single-point failure situation to where if you lose a system, you've totally lost that capability. So both on space, redundancy in space is going to be critical. General Saltzman talked a little bit about that earlier, so that's going to be important, but also, mix between the different domains is going to be critical going forward, and that is something we intend to continue. It's always a balance, right? You're never going to be able to afford everything. As was mentioned, we have a lot of modernization going on simultaneously across the department. So never going to be able to necessarily afford everything you'd like, but it is important to make sure that you are not, single point failure on these critical capabilities.
Thanks so much. Last week I had a great visit to Edwards Air Force Base, which is just north of my district in the 412 Test Wing. And just on the point that by the way, you've got an incredible team out there. They're doing incredible work. And General Alvin, we're grateful for the great support you've made to them. Just on the point, minor point, but on the point that Representative Elfreth made about energy storage, they have a huge private solar installation on that base territory. And if you could just provide a little linkage in solar local storage, I think you could make Edwards ensure that it's keep operating through potential natural and man-made disruption. So something to think about for the future. And with that, I yield back. Thanks so much.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Guam, Mr. Moylan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to our distinguished witnesses, thank you for your leadership and joining us here today. General Alvin, given the recent reports of unsafe and substandard conditions in unaccompanied housing on Guam, what steps is the department taking in the FY26 budget to address these deficiencies and ensure habitability of our service members?
Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate the question, and it's certainly that is something that we take very seriously. We always pride ourselves in really working hard for unaccompanied housing, and when the Secretary of the Navy went out there, he happened to find our very worst, through the Building Condition Index assessment, the very worst in our United States Air Force. But even in our very worst should not be that bad. So with respect to specifically Palau Dorm and then Rota after that, we aren't waiting until FY26. We had seen this coming, and it's been about 56 months since we took over all of those facilities from the Navy. And we had tried to identify and ensure that we were moving forward with all of our unaccompanied housing across the way. And then, of course, MAUR didn't help at all. But this year, we now are expected to award $53 million for the improvement of Palau Dorm this year, and it should start within, we should award it within 90 days and should start within 60 days after that. And so we are getting after that right now. It's never enough, and as you know, Guam is such an important place. We need to make sure our airmen are focused on mission rather than just their housing. So between the Palau dorms and the Rota dorms and across the board, we have an aggressive schedule against that.
It's great to hear, General. Thank you so much for that. And as a follow-up, is the department considering privatizing unaccompanied housing as long-term solution? And what oversight mechanisms will be in place to ensure quality and accountability?
Yeah, I would, of course, the Secretary says he's only been in for 2.5 weeks. We certainly haven't had those conversations, and it isn't really of all the things we would consider privatizing, that really isn't on our list right now because of that criticality of the young airmen who are living in there need that oversight and leadership of the next level NCOs to be there. So that's not currently in the plans for me to propose for the Secretary. We want to remain that under government control.
I'm looking forward to those great improvements. Thank you, General. Another question, General Alvin. Your testimony highlights reefer pack and the need to operate from austere airfields in contested environments. How is the Air Force resourcing Guam to support agile combat employment, particularly in terms of dispersed logistics, airlift, and handling of infrastructure under real-world contingency conditions?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. We're very excited about the Report Pack Resolute Forces Pacific exercises. This will be one of the largest exercises that we've done since the Cold War, quite frankly, because as we do exercises by sort of piece parts, we get insights, but we really want to see where the true shortfalls are. And we expect, and we've talked about this, Congressman, that we know logistics is going to be important. It's not just logistics because of the tyranny of distance. It's going to be logistics under attack and understanding those contested environments. We're going to ring this out this summer. We have already in the past couple years been putting forward requests in our budget for things like shelters and hardening and some non-kinetic capabilities to sense. So we know we have work to do to make this very critical concept of agile combat employment work. This summer, this exercise is going to help expose any more shortfalls that we haven't already identified. In addition, we know having preposition of parts and forward storage to be able to accelerate the repair of the platforms when they break down, that's also another key performance that we have to have in the Indo-Pacific, and that's why I put in my unfunded priority list about a $1.5 billion for spare parts to increase the health of the shelf so we can increase the combat generation under attack.
Excellent. Thank you, General. Secretary Mink, on a Codell last Congress, I flew to Guam with my colleagues on an Air Force C-40. The jet suffered a landing gear malfunction and was stranded on Guam, which doesn't mean it's bad to be stranded on Guam, but it was stranded there for several days while awaiting parts from CONUS. Does our operational force encounter this type of issue? And how can new force design concepts or prepositioning ensure airmen are not stranded while operating in the Pacific?
I know I don't have much time, so just real quickly, yes, that happens. I think the key thing, as you almost alluded to, is making sure you have enough spare parts and enough supplies to repair the aircraft across the force, and that's a focus in our budget submissions. And then pre-positioning. We can't pre-position everywhere because will never have, that would be terribly inefficient. So those sort of conditions do happen, but those are the two things. Make sure we have the right parts and make sure they're
expired. I would point out that all housing at Guam has fallen into an unacceptable state of disrepair, not just unaccompanied, and there's a lot of blame to go around up on the dais as well as at the witness table. But we all need to be focused on correcting that. And General Allen, I'm thrilled to hear about what you just described, but I would urge you and General Saltzman and the Secretary to let us know how we can help deal with all of it, because that is a critical area for our national security, and we need to start putting a lot of resources against its capabilities and what we need to do for our service members that are stationed there. With that, I'll recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Cisneros.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all our witnesses today for taking time out. I know what are your busy schedules to be with here today. General Alvin, I appreciate in your opening comments about the continuing resolution and really the effect that it's having on quality of life as well as recruiting. I wonder if you could go into more detail about how important it is to have a robust budget with recruiting in order to recruit individuals, because we are competing with corporations out there today that is vying for the same talent. So please.
Thank you for that, Congressman. It really is, because we are, our recruiters are just the hardest working in the business right now. And they work very hard to bring those Americans who want to raise their right hand and serve in the United States Air Force. They work very hard to give them some sense of this is what you can expect. Welcome to the team. This is when you're going to get here. And if we don't have that funding to be able to follow through on that and to bring those in, not only to keep the Americans to want to come into our force, but to ensure that we are bringing the right talent at the right time without that predictability of funding, or in this case, the mark that when we had already intended to recruit 3,000 more, we had to back off of that because we didn't have the funding. It's very disruptive, and that lack of reliability, it has ripple effects well into the future.
Right, and so even though we're talking about a continuing resolution now, a possibility of maybe another one, I mean, how many years down the line could that have effects into your recruiting?
Well, actually, the fact that we've been under a continuing resolution about most of the time for the past decade plus, that's part of the challenge that we're seeing here today.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate your answer on that. General Saltzman, former Secretary Kendall had written an article at the beginning of this year about the future of the Space Force and really about how it needs to really kind of transform. I think the example he used was he used a Navy analogy of a merchant marine going into actual becoming a fighting force Navy. Where are we on that timeline, and really what's it going to take us to get there to where we can see the Space Force becoming the fighting force that it should be?
Yeah, thank you for that, sir. It's equipment, it's training, and it's the operational concepts. I think we've done some pretty good work on the operational concepts. We generally know what we want to do. Acquisition of the equipment is a little longer lead item, but I feel good about the protection assets that we put in place in terms of resiliency, and now we've got good plans in place to put together counter space capabilities that convert us to the Navy, not the Merchant Marine. And then training, modeling and simulation, range assets, high-fidelity simulators to train our people to make sure that they practice the tactics that are going to be necessary. All of those are coming together. We'll have to grow a little bit as a force as we bring new capabilities on, new missions on, but I think we're well along our way to that evolution.
And as, all the services still do space. They're still in the space game there, but as the Space Force grows and becomes, larger, and is it taking over more of these roles to where now it'll be Space Force will kind of be there, or will it be more of a working together with the other services to kind of oversee their missions as well?
Well, thank you for that, because it came up a little earlier too, and I think General Alvin would agree with me. When we think about our missions and how we're going to perform the missions, the last question we ask is which domain should we use? First, it's about what are the threats, what are the capabilities, what's required of us to be survivable, to create the effects we want. You can get to where should this platform be located? Is it an airborne platform? You can get to that, but that's not our starting point. And so I see all of our challenges as all domain challenges. Some of those will play out in space. Some of those, I rely on maritime capability to do the counter space missions. So it's an all domain effort now in this networked environment. The modern battlefield doesn't just restrict itself to one domain or another.
All right, thank you for that. Mr. Secretary, you commented earlier about the Qatari 747, about $250 million, $250 million to retrofit it. But in that estimate that you gave to kind of modernize it or to bring it up to standards to meet the president's needs, did that also consider what it's going to take to go through that and make sure that that aircraft hasn't been compromised? Because as soon as I heard about this in the news, if I was the CPC, I would be trying to get somebody on there, bugging it, doing whatever they can. So how are we going to make sure that the aircraft was not compromised?
So thanks, Congressman. First off, I didn't say $250 million. And we can talk more details in a different environment about what needs to go on there. But part of upgrading it is essentially doing a deep sweep to make sure that there's no counterintelligence threats on the platform.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I have three real quick questions I'm going to try to ask for General Alvin and for the Secretary, all related to Sheppard Air Force Base. But start with one of my early achievements as a member of Congress was back in 2021 when I was successful in getting the new Child Development Center at Sheppard Air Force Base funded and authorized years ahead of its schedule. Shortly after breaking ground in 2023, however, construction crews identified asbestos in the ground and the project has still yet to be completed. I'm concerned the Department of the Air Force has not been aggressive enough in resolving these types of issues. Mr. Secretary and General Alvin, how are we addressing delays for projects like the CDC at Sheppard? Would both of you please commit to ensuring that this project can stay on track if at all possible and we can deliver this critical support that we need for our families at Sheppard?
Absolutely, I can commit, and I can commit to proposing to the Secretary that we put the right funding against it. The remediation should be complete by October, get us back on track. We understand this is one of those, that discovery. The last thing we want to do, though, is put a CDC where there's lead and it harm to the children. So we wanted to make sure that entire environment is fully cleaned up, and so by October 25, we should be able to have the remediation and get back on track.
Yes, sir, I understand that, and I appreciate that, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, I think we're expecting, if it by the end of the year get it cleaned up, get going, I think we're looking at like 28 to have it complete.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And if there's any opportunity to expedite things after that to make up for some of the lost time, I think we should do that. Thank you. I appreciate it. Another question here. Across the aircraft fleets in the U.S., Air Force inventory pilot training is foundational to our readiness. As the service continues to struggle with the pilot shortage, I'm also concerned about the delayed acquisition of the T-7, which is further constraining pilot training pipeline. Despite announcements earlier this year that the program may achieve an accelerated initial operational capability, there's been limited information about whether this will translate into expedited deliveries. General Alvin, would you provide an update on the T-7 timeline and what these delays mean for the Air Force's ability to train our pilots? What actions has the Department taken to expedite delivery of these platforms? And when could we expect delivery at Sheppard Air Force Base in particular?
Yeah, Congressman, we can give you the current understanding of the laydown of the order and the sequence and the timing. It still is for Sheppard. I'll go to the last question first. Right now, it's about 7 years from now before it finally. However, that can be accelerated. And here's what we've done to accelerate that. We have taken some of the articles that were going to be production articles and we put them into tests. So we've accelerated the number of T-7 platforms that are in test. Now, we've completed 140 flights. 67 of them were in all of last year. Already this year, we've made up the other ground. So we are accelerating the test. And as a test pilot, I've been checking in with it quite often, and the airplane is performing phenomenally. So we're trying to buy down the risk as fast as we can. If when we put the more platforms in, we can accelerate and move it to less by buying down the test risk, we're ready to do that. Because you know, Congressman, the T-38s are operating great, but those J-85 engines and all those challenges are things we don't want to contend with into the next decade. So we're stepping through and making sure that the MILCON is lined up associated with all the funding. And with Sheppard, of course, we have its crown jewel. It's got the Euro-NATO piece, and so which means they all get a say in when funding goes in to do the MILCON. And so we want to make sure we don't get ahead of that, make promises that our international partners we have to put money against that we have to renege on. So we want to make sure we have confidence in that and buy down the test risk as we lay out the actual production and the delivery capability across. It's a great platform. We can't get it fast enough.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And yeah, I agree 100%. And obviously, as important as that training program is to not only our pilots but our allied pilots, 7 years is a long time. So anything that that I can do on my end, obviously, from where I sit, I'm anxious and willing to help expedite that. It seems like that's a long ways out. All right. Thank you. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Sorensen.
Thank you to our chairman and ranking member. Good morning, just about good afternoon, and welcome to Secretary Menk, General Alvin, and General Saltzman. Thank you for your many years of service and dedication to our nation. I first have to say I'm really excited about where the Air Force is headed in terms of investing in new technology and new capabilities, while also making sure that we're equipping the Air National Guard. These new assets and capabilities will be crucial to our national security. Our next generation air missions, like the F-47s and CCAs, must also be fielded to the Air National Guard. I proudly represent the heart of Illinois, home to the 182nd Airlift Wing in Peoria. As you all are well aware, they are the gold standard for Air National Guard service. And I know I speak for everyone back home when I say that we're so excited to welcome the C-130J model to our airports and our airspace. The 182nd Wing is exemplary, and I'm proud to support their work. Doing the crucial work that many of our neighbors, my neighbors, are doing, Title V employees at the Peoria Air National Guard. Like so many of my colleagues here in the committee, I'm troubled why Donald Trump's administration thinks that cuts to the defense workforce are a good idea. This drain of expertise is detrimental at a time when we should be improving our readiness to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow. I'm concerned about what the loss of Title V civilian employees at our Air National Guard bases across the country and what it means for overall readiness. To the Secretary, could you explain how the loss of these employees in Air National Guard will impact our missions, but how should other federal workers feel? How are they supposed to keep their morale so high if cuts are happening to the best workers on their team?
Mr. Congressman, thanks. I can't speak specifically to Peoria. Been there a couple times, but can't speak to the Guard base there and how they're going to handle the civilian workforce impacts. I think overall, though, across the department, the push, and again, civilian workers have been critical. I've been one for 30-odd years, so critical to the Defense Department. Saying that, though, there's always an opportunity to improve efficiencies. Any organization has an opportunity to improve efficiencies, and I think that's what's going on in the department right now. Is how do we continue to increase efficiency, support or prioritize the workforce on the highest priority missions, so that we can deliver these capabilities. We have more resources to deliver critical capabilities. But it's always going to be a balance, right? You're always going to be a balance. I've seen this many times in my career where there's give and take on the size of the workforce, and we're in another area where we're trying to improve our efficiencies. I've done it before, and that's what we work across the department, try to make sure that we continue to meet the priorities.
So what do I say to people when they, back home, when somebody hears we want to improve efficiency? There's a skip of your heart, because does the improving of the efficiency mean it's my job? What do I say?
So it's always hard. You're exactly right. It's always hard. But as we've discussed, the prioritization of funds, both on hardware and people, are the tough decisions sometimes that we have to make. But we do and need to do everything we can to support the workforce as we do that.
I'm also concerned about our National Guard federal technicians. Do you expect that the President's 2026 budget will request adequate funding to support our National Guard's federal technicians?
Be happy to discuss that once the budget's released, Congressman.
I look forward to seeing it, as everyone does. And while I have just 1 minute left, I want to acknowledge that just yesterday, the Rock Island Arsenal's Joint Manufacturing and Technology Center just received their AS 9100 certification. This will allow them to deliver the best components to the aerospace industry, and I strongly urge the Air Force to make efforts to partner with our organic industrial base to make sure that our warfighters have everything that they need. Also, as a meteorologist, I'd be remiss as we begin hurricane season. My thanks to the courageous folks at the Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunters who do everything that they can to fly into the world's biggest storms with the sole purpose of keeping us safe. So may they stay safe in this hurricane season. And if you ever need a meteorologist from Congress to fly with them, just give me a call. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
That's a first for me. Gentleman from Virginia, Mr. McGuire, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses. Thank you to our men and women in the military. Your service is important, and we would not have a country without you. I want to make a couple of statements before I get into questions. I have a resolution I'm working on. It's H.R. 3478. I asked the witnesses to write that down, H.R. 3478. It's the Manned Aircraft Clarification Act. There are many reasons why Langley and other places didn't engage drones. I'm sure you know some of that I don't know. But I believe a lot of the hesitation was an advisory put out by the DOJ in 2020. So the Manned Aircraft Clarification Act, H.R. 3478, will take care of almost all of the SLTT problems and almost all of the DOT problems. And I know you guys have got actual ways of shooting them down. Now, my wife and I were with our church in Israel about 3 years ago on a mountain looking into a valley, and we saw F-35s come in and landing and then disappearing underground, kind of like an aircraft carrier. I'm sure that would be super expensive, but we're looking at what happened in Russia. I'm sure you guys would consider that and other options. All right, now to the questions. Secretary Mink. I think I heard one of you say earlier that new missions require new resources. The Air Force continues to prioritize modernization across its missile enterprise, including next generation missiles, propulsion, advanced tactical and air defense systems, space launch, and nuclear modernization, all of which depend on solid rocket motors. Concerns have been voiced about the domestic supply chain and increasing domestic demand signals for these critical Air Force needs. How is the Air Force working to ensure a stable and competitive domestic supply of solid rocket motors to meet program requirements, to include addressing current industrial base constraints and production bottlenecks?
So, Congressman, thanks for the question. I'm not sure I can speak to the overall approach. I'll ask General Alvin for help on that. I know we've seen a couple of challenges, particularly in some of the actually, in some of our launch programs and other programs, there's been some challenges with the solid rocket motors that are being addressed right now. But for the overall, particularly in the missile category, I'll turn General Alvin.
Actually, nothing to add systemically across the board, but with each, the integration has always been the challenge, and making sure that we have the right capability on those. But we can take that one for the record and see if there's anything more.
Sure. Has the Air Force considered supporting campus-style solid rocket motor production models that would leverage proven private sector expertise, co-located manufacturing? I went and toured Starbase in Texas, and they've got this campus-style, everything's all in one spot. So I'd ask that you guys consider that. All right, General Saltzman, President Trump's Golden Dome executive order calls for development and deployment of non-kinetic capabilities to augment the kinetic defeat of advanced cruise missiles. Some of these capabilities include lasers and particle beam weapons technologies, which require a large amount of power to operate. I'd expect the Space Force to fully explore deploying these capabilities to their interceptor architecture. Since I've entered Congress, I've been a big proponent of deploying advanced nuclear reactor technology like small modular reactors and micro nuclear reactors on orbit and micro reactors in orbit. Nuclear energy has 1,000 times the power density of solar and will power not just lasers, but our communications and data collections as well. So is the Space Force looking into the adoption of nuclear technology into our next generation space architecture?
Well, first and foremost, I can tell you that we are looking into directed energy. We see this the same way you do. This is a very promising technology that we have to explore. If you don't mind, I'd like to talk to you maybe in a different environment about the things that we are doing and see if there is room for that. We'll have to take that for the record. I'm not tracking anything specific.
That sounds great. And then Secretary Mink and General Alvin, what is the Air Force strategy to store and transport a large stockpile of CCAs? How are you coordinating your efforts with the U.S. Transportation Command?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Congressman, because the beauty of what we're doing right now, we are still having the CCAs be developed in a prototype part of its life cycle. At the same time, we are standing up an experimental operations unit. So as we understand the platform, we understand the autonomy, we're looking into how we intend to actually employ, sustain, maintain them. And that will drive our operational concepts as to whether they are, some are forward positioned or whether they're forward deployed or whether they're stored here. That is work that is ongoing, but that is front of mind for our experimental operations units, understanding how to make sure that we take on this capability as the game changer that it really is.
Well, thank you very much. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina who almost has good barbecue.
There you go.
Mr. Davis.
Thank you for acknowledging that, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, congratulations on your recent appointment. And actually, I really look forward to working with you, so congratulations to you. And General Saltzman, thank you always for what you're doing in the space world. General Alvin, it's always good to see you. I appreciate conversations in between these meetings, and I probably just want to spend a little bit more time on questions that we've already talked about, just having reassurances towards those conversations, to be candid. So the first question is, as we are talking about Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, could you please expand on the commitment, if it remains, as we've had many conversations now, or several conversations, and I'm saying beyond just you, General Spain and others, regarding bringing the Block 229 F-15Es to Seymour Johnson Air Force Base once those F-35s come online?
Yeah, thank you. That continues to be our plan as we get them there. So that is on track with the manner it has been in the last couple of years. We still think it's the right thing to do to keep that capability and keep Seymour Johnson as one of sort of the core for F-15E, F-15EX training as well.
Thank you so much, which then also brings me into the next question, being that we're seeing an increased role of the training at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, contingent upon obviously a reconciliation package going through. How do we plan to address that increased training?
Yeah, we're certainly working with that with Air Combat Command to understand what the increased throughput would be. Right now, as we're also looking at getting more pilot training graduates out as we're starting to increase that pipeline. So Air Combat Command is looking at that specifically to make sure we can handle. Now, at that point, it just becomes you put more platforms in. Do we require more maintenance and more instructors, et cetera, to accommodate that? So we're looking at the increased throughput caused by those, which is going to be ramping up over the next few years. We're taking a close look at that right now.
Thank you so much for that. And then, obviously, it then brings me back to still dealing with reconciliation. When we have dealt with Congress, the prior conversations dealing with divestment, obviously, there was a period as we were dealing with those conversations and the ultimate decision. Now the decision's been made, and we're bringing forth now revenue appropriations, $127 million, to address the current needs in terms of operational needs at Seymour, the F-15Es that are currently there, those 220s. Could you speak on that, please? The commitment of making sure that those funds remain in place.
Well, yeah, because those are just as critical as the others. We still have a portion of our force that is flying in the 220s, and regardless of that, the quality of the support infrastructure and everything that makes that mission happen, we can't let drop. Because as we see with an increase in the introduction of the F-15EX, there's just a general proposition that this is going to be a platform with both variants that's going to be a part of our future, a growing part of our future, more so than we thought of when we started these conversations several years ago.
That's right. And I would just take a moment to continue to articulate. I'm constantly on the base, constantly staying engaged, and realize the dire need that exists there. And Some of this is because of just dealing with the prior decisions that now have been made, but nevertheless, as decisions are being made, we need to make sure we're still in position to deal with addressing those decisions. And I just want to continue to uplift those, bring them to the forefront. Now, looking into the future, obviously I have a lot of interest in Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. In the world of, we continue to talk about F-15EXs, and notice the argument and our conversations are driven just trying to increase the F-15E presence at Seymour with the 229s. But do you maybe see a world in which there may be the F-15EXs or, under NGAD, my question would be, even potentially F-47s at Seymour?
Well, we certainly need to look at the mission. Of course, when we think of the F-47, it eventually is sort of a follow-on to the F-22. So it's never a one-for-one replacement, but understanding the different mission sets that are required of those different types of platforms. But when we certainly look at the future, we need to also understand where we might want to put...
And let me take my last 5 seconds here. Do you see the world of transferring aircraft from Seymour to the Guard to help...
We need to have a balanced total force to make sure that we have capability for the future. So I wouldn't take anything off the table at this point.
Gentlemen,
Thank you so
time
much.
expired. Chair, I recognize a gentleman from Georgia, Dr. McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here with us today. That's awesome. One of the things that really worried us about the lessons learned we had overseas right now with the Operation Rough Rider and the deployment to the Yemen area. What kind of lessons, I'll probably this with you, General, what kind of lessons did we learn with the Houthis and what we can do better with both measures and countermeasures, offensive and defensive coordination against those sort of terrorist organizations?
Well, we're certainly learning a lot in the CENTCOM AOR, and you mentioned the Houthis specifically. Between that and the salvo that that came from Iran, 18 months ago or almost 2 years ago now, we're learning a lot about how we need to address threats that might be low cost, high volume, and don't end up on the wrong side of the cost curve. And so even just most recently, we have developed capabilities that were lower cost that we are now putting on platforms over in the Middle East. So for example, whereas before we would have an F-15E with an AIM-9X on it, which is $400,000 a pop, to maybe an AMRAAM, which is over $1 million pop, shooting down the cheaper drones. Now we need to protect our assets, so we did what the situation required. However, we have more recently developed capabilities to where we can have laser-guided rockets, which are doing the same thing against those platforms. So instead of $400,000 or $1 million a pop, these things are $32,000 a shot, and you could put 42 shots on an aircraft. So it's showing that we have the ability to adapt our current force structure to meet those threats in the Middle East, that we aren't expending all the resources that we need to do to develop the capabilities, the high-end capabilities to meet the Chinese threat in the Indo-Pacific.
And do you think on countermeasures, as far as like the cheap drones they can send after us on our localities, we saw we had some U.S. troops actually killed not that long ago by drone strikes from terrorist organizations, and it was on our bases. What kind of hardened structures are we using, or even nets, anything cheap, whatever we can use? Are we looking at some things that are realistically going to be deployed against these things that are very difficult to go after mass-wise?
We are, and in fact, within CENTCOM, and I'm speaking for the Air Force bases. Of course, this was at Al-Assad, but in the Air Force bases, I was in one of the bases here over Christmas time, and they are using these stitching together the various counter-UAS systems. But rethinking, this is not only just the capabilities, it has to be the operational concepts on how to defend a base in a way we hadn't thought about because they'd been uncontested for 25, 30 years. So now having a unit train ahead of time to know how to defend the base and go in and preserve that installation and the force generation that it provides is absolutely key. I think we're making some progress on that. It's not only the capabilities, it's the units that are trained to go over there and fight, but they're trained ahead of time as units. Those things are key.
Perfect. And Mr. Secretary, I know one of the things that we talked about, AI predictability and maintenance, and we talked, the chair talked about our ability to stay up above 60% about, especially with aircraft on the pilot. And I know that when you have a bunch of aircraft that are down because we didn't predict it appropriately, it puts us at a disadvantage. Some of the readiness rates are really, really poor, obviously. We're using AI predictive models to get on top of that.
We are. There's been a number of efforts to start doing that, and I think that's going to help. But I also think even over the years, because of budget pressures, we've squeezed that, and even though we knew we were squeezing it. So we really didn't take advanced predictive models to know that we were actually squeezing it, and that now we're trying to reverse that. We're trying to put more focus on readiness, trying to make sure that we have the parts sustainment, and we had a little discussion earlier about right to repair, those sorts of things. So there's going to be a focus across the board, but some of the advanced analytics to help predict that are going to be important, as they are now, but they will continue to probably increase in importance.
Great. And I always encourage the secretaries, just like the commandants and the leaders of each individual service, to be as transparent as possible about the stuff that you guys need. And you always need more, always need more. I remember when General Krulak was the only general out of the service commanders that really said, hey, we need more, we're suffering. And then when everything started falling apart, they're like, only one general told us we needed more. The chair has been very open and honest about the fact that we need more investment in our military. So just be very aggressive on that. We'll receive that well, I think. Final question. Now, this doesn't really apply to the Space Force because you guys are brand new, but we can see a lot of legacy systems that aren't benefiting all the services. The Marine Corps is trying to shed some of those things that we don't use for the next war, not the last war. And there is some protectionism in Congress, I think, on systems. And I think the last recent Futures Command analysis of the Air Force, like 30% of your assets really aren't futuristic. They're not thinking about the next war. They're thinking about the last war. Maybe they're protectionist from the standpoint of people have things produced in their districts. I would love to see you identify stuff. We can replant those things with the futuristic, cheaper, better stuff that we use in the future. I hope you'll work with us to identify those things that we don't need anymore. It's okay. Work with us in Congress. We'll help you collectively.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, now I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Tran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Secretary Mink, General Saltzman, General Alvin. Thank you all for your service and for your testimony today. As you know, the Space Development Agency was created to drive innovation and field capabilities rapidly, but as the SDA transitions further into the Space Force, there are uncertainties about maintaining its agility and unique acquisition model. Recently, there have been rumors suggesting that SDA's Tranche 2 and Tranche 3 transport layers are facing termination within the current 2026 DoD budget in favor of MILNET. As you know, SDA's transport layer is the only direct-to-platform constellation in development. The alternative currently does not have a direct-to-platform capability and is optimized for high data rate transfer to ground stations and then dissemination of data. SDA's transport layer provides essential low-latency communication that reaches the tactical edge. Transport is the only proven Link 16 capability in space. With transport's Link 16 capabilities will not exist for at least 3 years. Not only would cancellation of Tranche 2 result in the termination of hundreds of millions of dollars of ongoing fixed-price contracts, severely degrading and eliminating areas of the growing space industrial base, but also would delay getting this critical capability directly to the warfighter. Can you ensure that SDA's Tranche 2 transport layer will be protected within the Department's 2026 budget? Please also speak to generally about the importance of SDA to the growing space industrial base in California and across the country and how it ensures competition and resiliency moving forward.
So the FY26 budget, of course, is not finalized yet. The request hasn't come over yet, so we'll take a look at the specific details once those are finalized for sure. I agree with you 100% that the capabilities that SDA is pursuing are vital to almost every aspect of the Space Force mission and the Joint Force writ large. The data transport layer is vital. And the capabilities that we're delivering in Tranche 2 in particular are key to that success. So we're committed to making sure that that program is successful and looking at the broad array of capabilities that might complement it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. The Air Force has emphasized the urgency of the Combat Collaborative Aircraft CCA program in enabling affordable mass and operational advantage against peer adversaries. Yet there's concerns that Increment 1 aircraft under development may be treated primarily as test beds rather than operational assets. What specific steps is the department taking to ensure that these Increment 1 platforms are not merely prototypes for evaluation, but are in fact fielded in meaningful numbers on an operationally relevant timeline to meet the pacing threat from China?
Thank you very much for the question, because frankly, that's the first I'd heard that anyone was considering them only becoming test articles. We are absolutely integrating them into our operational air forces. Matter of fact, the two competitors that we down-selected for prototypes, General Atomics and Anduril, are competing very heavily against each other for us to be able to use both of them. In parallel to the development and the prototyping of the actual platforms, we have a simultaneous program going on for the development of the autonomy. It's called Project Venom. So we're understanding how we can leverage the autonomy, put them into the platforms, and make better use of them in human-machine teaming. Simultaneous to that, we have the experimental operational unit. So as soon as they come online, and we're expecting to have a couple hundred of them by the end of the FIDEP, as soon as they come online, we want to be able to integrate them, employ them, and advance their capabilities and learn about the human-machine teaming in an operationally relevant time frame. The challenge is that we're going to stick with is there's always something you say, if you spend a little longer, we can put something else on it. We can put something. Speed to ramp is the key here. Get it out there, get the usefulness of it, and learn from it. Fully expect them to be operationally utilized.
That's right. Thank you so much, General. I appreciate that testimony, and thank you to all three of you for being here. With that, Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Harrigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony today, gentlemen. Great to have you here. We had the Army in here yesterday and learned a lot from them, and I wanted to talk to you, General Alvin. In January of this year, you wrote an op-ed for Breaking Defense, in which you stated that the Air Force is now kind of at a make-or-break moment, and I fully agree with you. Couldn't agree more. The Air Force cannot afford to keep doing things the way that it has always done them. And if we're truly serious about prevailing in the next conflict or properly deterring the next conflict against the PRC, we've got to get serious about how we actually align our resources. And when I take a look at the equivalent of the balance sheet and the P&L for the Air Force, it bleeds red from both a infrastructure perspective and a legacy systems perspective. Your O&M budgets are just absolutely bleeding. And you talked a little bit about that today. You talked about some excess infrastructure that you have, both from facilities perspective as well as from an available apron perspective. My colleague from Georgia talked about identifying certain systems that, as we all know here, may be parochial, right? They may be, and some of these decisions have been made in the best interests of certain districts across the country, but they haven't been made in the best interests of the United States and America moving forward. And I think we need to fix that. So my question for both you and the Secretary is, do you have a similar plan, much like we were briefed yesterday by the Army Transformation Initiative? Do you have a similar plan in the Air Force to purge these legacy weapon systems, these legacy force structures, and reallocate some of this real estate that you have that's not helping your budgets right now so that we can create the Air Force of the future? Do you have a formal plan for that?
I'll take the first shot at it and then let the Secretary correct me 100%. But our plan is different from the Army's, is that our plan, it requires growth either way. And so when we look at specifically with the infrastructure, that is one where there can be pure savings, but it's not as easy as saying, well, let's just close this or that, which is why we really want to work with Congress, because you might have 10 installations that might have 10% excess each on them, but that doesn't mean you close any one of them without some collaboration or understanding. For me, and for my advice to the Secretary is, however that gets resolved, as long as it's off my books, that excess infrastructure, whatever it costs to do that, we can recapitalize that. So that would be one plan, is to work with ways to generate revenue or do something to where that excess infrastructure that is not supporting our airmen's quality of work or quality of life is no longer on our books. Because that is when in tooth to tail, that's all tail. And so eliminating that is part one. The other part is, the tougher part is really fully divesting ourselves of some of the legacy force structure. I will tell you, though, that this prioritization that we're directed to do to ensure what would it look like if we had to drop off some percentage of our budget to make room for the President's priorities, that sharpened our focus. And so it's very clearly in the aggregate. Three things: defend the homeland from the air, and we do the nuclear recapitalization to support strategic deterrence, and then projecting power to deter the PRC. Some things fall out of the bottom of those, but they're very important to the joint force. So we find that The Joint Force loves the Air Force as well. So we find ourselves challenged to say, pull any of the main capabilities out, not only because there are parochial interests within districts and states, but also there are some parochial interests within other parts of the Joint Force. So we will continue to identify those things that are least dear to us, but before it makes it out of the Department of Defense, we need to understand they may be least dear to us, but if they're so dear to the Joint Force, then that needs to be resourced elsewhere. So that is the challenge for us. It's a
Thanks, General. And before, Mr. Secretary, you give your answer, I'd like to say very clearly, I don't think anybody has any interest in closing off any infrastructure, right? We've got to make it relevant, because once we lose it, we never get it back, and it's a loss of national capability. So just to clarify that. Mr. Secretary, do you have any thoughts? You've got about 40 seconds.
I guess I just reinforce your statement that evolving and modernizing the force is critical. The question asked earlier about some of the things we learned in Yemen, and yeah, a lot of the low-end threats, but we also learned that unfortunately the proliferation of some of the high-end Russian anti-aircraft and other systems, and what we've seen within the Ukraine theater is if you don't have a survivable system, you're in trouble even if you're over Yemen.
Mr. Secretary, in the last 10 seconds, I'm going to reclaim my time here. I just encourage both of you to take a very hard look at the assets that we have, and if they have not helped us win the last 30 years of war, and if they are not helpful to deterring or defeating China, we need to make the hard decisions and get rid of them. Thank you.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Gary Mendy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Milk, welcome. Look forward to working with you in the days ahead. I note your extensive experience in space operations, and I'll focus on that. General Saltzman, good to see you once again. You're going to get a bye this time. As for you, General Alvin, we've been down through this. Would you be disappointed if I didn't take up the Sentinel? I suspect, Secretary, you've been well briefed. I understand the Sentinel has come up from some of my colleagues, and that's good. This is a question for you, Mr. Secretary. This is a quote from the President not so long ago. There is no reason for U.S. to be building brand new nuclear weapons. We're all spending a lot of money that we could be spending on other things that are actually, hopefully, much more productive. Secretary Mink, do you agree or disagree with the President?
Well, what I'd say is that nuclear deterrence across the board is one of the highest priorities of the nuclear enterprise. National security is the highest priority, and Sentinel is one of those programs. We continue to obviously support that program, and we're doing everything we can to get it back on track. I think the concern has been, and this is really the delivery system for nuclear weapons, not the nuclear weapons themselves. We don't build those. This is the delivery systems, and just the fact that we need to modernize, given the age of the Minuteman III, is critical, as well as some additional capability we need to operate in the future environment that we could talk about in more detail in a separate environment. So we are spending a lot of time making sure that we're doing this program right. It just went through McCurdy, so obviously costs grew. We got to make sure that we execute, so that we're efficient in line with the President's directive to support the homeland and deter China.
If I were to look at the written testimony that will soon be available, yours and others, it would seem as though you disagree with the President because the Sentinel is a new nuclear delivery system.
So Congressman, I'd have to go back and look at specifics at the quote you pulled. I have never and do not believe that I disagree with the President on anything. I think we're supporting his priorities, which is support the homeland, and this is one of the programs that we will use to support the homeland, along with a number of the other programs that the Department provides to the nation.
This introduction was specifically to bring to your attention a $200 billion new weapon system. The rocket itself and the various infrastructure needed is well over $150 billion now. There is a new nuclear bomb, new command and control systems, and other bits and pieces along the way that have pushed this to $200 billion. Quoting the President, we're spending a lot of money that we could be spending on other things that are actually, hopefully, much more productive. Direct quote from the President, and I'll get that delivered to you. Bottom line of this is that we have a third leg of the triad the Minuteman III, which under the current plan for the Sentinel would require that the Minuteman III continue to be operative for at least another decade, at which time the first Sentinel would be available to begin the replacement process. We don't have to stop the Sentinel program, but we can certainly delay it and then spend that money on things that have been discussed by my colleagues here, which are much more relevant to today's fighting. There's a very interesting word that is used in support of the Sentinel and the Minuteman III, and that is it is the most responsive leg. And I would opine that the reason it's the most responsive is that it is the use it or lose it leg, in which the rockets would have to be deployed or be taken out by an incoming nuclear attack. However, there are other very responsive ones. The B-21, for example, at something less than $1 billion a copy. Let's just assume it's 150 billion. How many B-21s could you have that are clearly responsive?
Congressman, I'm not going to try to do that math in my head. I would say that
somewhere about 150.
The Sentinel program is designed to be actually a very survivable system.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses. What I want to talk to you, General Elvin, about is recruiting. We had the posturing on the Army, and literally when the Secretary of the Army mentioned that they had hit their goals, I cheered, and other members of this committee did, because we were in a crisis mode year over year. It's one thing to miss your recruiting goals in a given year, but when you're doing it year over year, 3, 4, 5 in a row, then it gets to be crisis. So if you could talk to us a little bit about where we are with recruiting with the Air Force, why you think it turned around. What I would also encourage you to do, and the Secretary as well, is let's find out the reasons. Everybody has their suppositions and maybe expectations as to why, but I'd really like to figure out why people are now joining so we can then replicate it and continue on, if you could expound.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to be very brief because I could go on for an hour with you. Maybe I'll come in and see you afterwards. I would say, first of all, I love the way you characterize it, crisis versus a challenge. The Air Force only had 1 year we didn't make it.
Okay.
We've only had 1 year that we didn't meet our recruiting goals. Since then we have. We think it's a combination of several things. The COVID hangover where we couldn't get our folks into the schools and start getting the Americans excited about joining the United States Air Force. We also had certain maybe outdated policies. We also had this sort of mix-in of the new medical system by which you evaluated people's ability to join, and that caused some bottlenecks in the time between when you got the contact, or as the Marines say, contact to contract. That sort of mucked up that for a little while. All those things came together, but fundamentally, we think it's several things. It's also a unifying focus, focusing on the threat, focusing on the warrior ethos. All of these things come together. And as we do that, we want to ensure, to your point, Congressman, to your point, we want to ensure the things that we are doing different. We want to track in a longitudinal study format to see year over year, are those the recruits, the ones that are staying, the ones that are performing? So we're doing that analysis. We are confident with good shoe leather, good IT support for our recruiting, it'll continue to get more contacts out there, and that's the key.
In general, roughly, what's the number when you talk Air Guard, Reserve, and Active on a year-over-year basis? What are we looking at?
Well,
roughly.
On the active side, we look for about 31,000.
Okay.
It was the goal for our enlist recruiting. And on the Guard side, it's closer to, I want to make sure I got it right.
Guard and Reserve total?
Well, on the Guard side, I think it's 6,000, and the Reserve is 4,000. I will get you the
Okay, so roughly 40. Okay, thank you. And then are we making, real quickly, because I want to move on a couple other things, for those that qualify in every other regard, but they have maybe some, physically they're not quite up to mark, are we having... are we doing anything special for them?
We're still holding them to the same standard.
Okay.
When you get there.
But we're not, like, if they miss, I think one of the other branches is putting them through another month of prep. They're not kicking them back.
We haven't had to do that.
You haven't had to do that. Okay. Thank you. As far as, Mr. Secretary, I'm sorry, General Saltzman, with cyber, tomorrow is going to be more important than it is today, and furthermore, how are we attracting folks to serve in cyber because it is set with specificity, and maybe not just with the military, maybe on the civilian side? And how are we training them, and how are we retaining them? And then what can we do in Congress to give you the tools to get these very critical people in the future, today and in the future?
We've had a lot of luck with recruiting. There's a lot of interest in coming in and learning cyber techniques and cyber capabilities in the military, and we're taking advantage of that, certainly. We rely on the Air Force training pipeline to train our enlisted cadre with regards to cyber, and we're almost uniquely, wholly committed to cyber mission defense, meaning we're not protecting our unclassified networks, our administrative networks. We're focused on just the weapon systems and those mission networks. So we have a smaller cyber force dedicated to just that mission network protection. But the point you raised about can we keep them in and keep them retained, we're doing everything we can to make sure they stay on the leading edge of cyber defense technology, working with industry, deploying some of our Guardian cyber people into industry to learn the techniques there and then come back and deliver to us. So we're trying to do as much as we can to keep the education at a high level.
And if we have to, in Congress today, provide any monies for specific scholarships, just let us know, Mr. Secretary, what we can do in that regard, because it is so critical moving forward. And with my last 20 seconds, I want to say, Mr. Secretary, welcome. You were the right man at the right time in the right place for the right job, and it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
You have 11 more seconds.
Thank you very much.
Chairman, I yield back.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank our witnesses. I just want to deal first with the probe about research and development readiness issues. And I noticed, with AFWorks, and I noticed with AFVentures, coordination with the Air Force and the commercial side of things. But one of the areas I think that really would be advantageous is to have more of a collaboration with the universities, colleges, and other schools. I know the Air Force does that with Howard, but in my district, I'm looking at collaboration sometimes with MIT and Lincoln Laboratories, those groups, but I also look at a program we deal with the Navy, and it's at the University of Massachusetts in my district, where they have a program for marine undersea technology research, and they develop their own curriculum in conjunction with the Navy, and they're working on the research very successfully, but also those people are a pipeline to more recruitment and more service personnel. Elsewhere in my district, there's community college working on avionics. The Cape Cod Community College has a program on avionics training, and they have avionics maintenance technician licenses that come out of it, avionics electronic technology, technicians licenses on it. And there's a waiting list to participate in this. So could you tell me what avenues you have, either with grants or other outreaches to the universities and the schools that are there? Bridgewater State University, my district, has a pilot training program. So is there ways we can link? Because I see a benefit all the way around to really expanding interest in these kind of relationships. I guess Mr. Secretary or General Alvin probably would be the better two, I guess, for this.
So Congressman, I agree. Getting access, we develop and operate some of the most complex systems, and innovating faster than the adversary is just critical for us to maintain our lethality edge. Access to the technical skills within the U.S., not just industry, but at universities is important. One of the things, interestingly, just yesterday, I had a conversation about how we might make it easier to get access to some of that technical skills. Sometimes it takes a while for us to set up agreements with universities. Is there a way we can standardize that?
Well, the Navy, for instance, has a grant.
Yeah, maybe we can make it a little bit easier for us to get access and more flexible for us to get access to that talent. So I think it's important, and that's something that I will continue.
Yeah, I think it's not just research, but it's a pipeline to recruitment.
Oh, sure. Once you get access and
trained recruitment too. They're already trained.
One of the best ways to maintain and get people to stay in the service is keep them interested. And one of the ways to get them into the service is to get them interested through university programs like that.
Well, thank you. I just have a little over a minute left, and I just wanted to just touch on one issue. We've done a lot of discussions about morale from the bottom up. Can you discuss, I have some concerns for morale from the top down on our branches. How important is it to have that strong morale at the top of the chain of command?
I think it's critical across the board to ensure that, and of course, by the time you hang around as long as Salty and I have, you've got that commitment and you know what the purpose is. But it's very important to keep the morale and keep the esprit de corps amongst teams.
Yeah, I'm worried because, and I understand there's discretion and it can be, but in the short period of this administration, there's 40 generals or somewhere along that line, so the 4-star ranking above, and 10% of them have been removed. And that's the discretion of the administration. But I'm worried. And when I look at someone that I've had great admiration for by being on this committee, General Timothy Hawk, few people in our military have the expertise that he had. He's got the cyber expertise unmatched, I think, among many, and the technical intel that goes with that. He's an extraordinary resource. And he was removed without cause, even though he served 4 presidents. He was removed without cause, and the rumors were, or the reports were, the only reason was a conspiracy theorist for 9/11, Laura Loomer. So I am worried if this continues for morale from the top down, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Mink, the Robins Air Force Base, Robins Air Logistics Complex is a critical logistics depot maintenance part of the United States Air Force. I'd love for you to come down and visit Robins and accompany you there, as well as Moody, where we look forward to accepting the F-35. Can you confirm that the U.S. Air Force is still committed to a 3-depot strategy?
Yes, Congressman, I can confirm that, and looking forward to coming for a visit. And Robins is critical infrastructure.
Yes, sir. As the Air Force, as other branches, continue to divest older equipment, non-survivable equipment, I want to speak specifically to ISR. So we're getting rid of a lot of airborne ISR. How are you going to handle the demand for the ISR services that the combatant commanders need? How are we going to task that with the drawdowns?
Hey, Congressman, that's always, you ask any combatant commander, they're always looking for more theater ISR. And they say ISR, when you think about it, intelligence is an outcome. SNR, surveillance and reconnaissance is a mission. They really want that situational awareness to help them make decisions. That's what it is. Historically, it's come through platforms. And so that's what they say, I need the theater ISR. They really need some of those decision support mechanisms. And so as we move from some of that that's been manned to some of that that's been unmanned, some of that's been an airborne layer, now some of that's going to go to space. Some of it has been evolving with open source intelligence fusion. So I think we need to be creative about understanding what is the capability you need rather than the platform you need. And as they do desire the platforms in any one domain or another, then we're going to have to manage those scarce resources as we evolve to those things that we've used in the past because we've had more permissive environments to those things that will be survivable in the most contested environment.
I agree with you on that. I would also tell you, though, that we have the Western Hemisphere. We have large areas of Africa that we do have systems that are capable of operating in those areas, and we're drawing down those systems in the belief that we're going to have other systems. And I do worry that we draw down faster than we put up. And when it comes to carrying out the mission, we're collecting a tremendous amount of data in the new platforms. That data has to be processed and turned into information to carry out the mission on the ground. And so there are a lot of steps there, and we have to get every one of them right, because any missing link, causes a problem for, the troops that are carrying out the mission on the ground. One last question: the training ranges. This was brought up during the confirmation hearing of General Kane. He highlighted how the training ranges are inadequate to prepare both air and space forces for our modern adversaries. How do you intend to better incorporate low-cost electronic warfare targets and decoys to better replicate near-peer adversaries?
Thank you, Congressman. I can let General Saltzman speak to the space side. But on the air side, obviously, the Nevada Test and Training Range and J-Park out up in Alaska and in the Pacific are the primary ones that we want to ensure we're paced for the high-end threat. To the extent that we can bring up the other ranges, we will do so. But you made the right point, which these threat emitters are the ones that can replicate better than they have been able to do in the past to get better training on those ranges. Those low and mid-cost threat emitters are the key. And as we do that, we also need to look into the procurement of those emitters, just like we're doing everything else. Think about open systems, modular architecture that allows us to take new technologies as a new characterization of threats changes, that we need to be able to adapt so the emitters that we have today aren't obsolete tomorrow. So those are the answer. You hit the answer. Getting more of those emitters, putting them on the ranges, and being able to exercise them is going to be the key going forward. And that's our path.
General Saltzman, briefly.
Yes, sir. I would just add to that we're investing heavily in digital ranges to make sure that the operators have the threat replication to practice their tactics. But we're also looking at on-orbit capabilities, both for live test as well as training, to make sure we get live data to better build the models that go into our digital ranges.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Carvajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today and your service. General Saltzman, as you know, the increased launch cadence at Vandenberg, which is in my district, has caused noise disturbance as the cadence of launches has increased. The number of constituent complaints have grown. Space is critical to our national security, and I'm one of the biggest supporters in Congress. But we need to get buy-in from the surrounding bases. The leadership at Vandenberg has been extremely helpful, I must say, in working with me and my team to find solutions, like changing launch windows and trajectories when possible to minimize sonic boom impacts to area residents. So I wanted to thank you for that. General Saltzman, do you think additional studies on sonic booms from launch would help us better understand how to minimize their impact on nearby communities?
Well, thank you for your support, Congressman. It's good to see you. I think absolutely having data that we can assess based on the new environmental conditions with the launch tempo, the fog alone changes the acoustics out there on the point, as you know. So collecting that data, which we are actively doing, and then building modeling and simulation software to ingest that data and help us determine exactly how we might be able to best mitigate those circumstances is what we're pursuing. But we're doing that hand in glove with community outreach, because we want to make sure we understand precisely what the issues are and where those issues are being seen as part of the data collection, and we want to be as transparent as we can with the local community because they're so important to us.
Thank you. I also appreciate you putting sound monitors throughout the Central Coast to make sure that we get it as best and as right as possible in mitigating the noise. So thank you again. So far through NSSL, only SpaceX is certified to launch out of both the eastern and western ranges. ULA has had to give up 2 of its previously won launches out of Vandenberg because it lacks certification on the West Coast. Blue Origin can't even compete for launches from Vandenberg because they don't yet have a West Coast launch pad. If NSSL launches out of the Western Range can only be provided by one company, then we don't really have competition, do we? The Space Force can create an environment for competition, but we still need providers to compete seriously. General Saltzman, will you say it is a national security risk to only have one NSSL provider certified to launch out of the Western Range? And what can the Space Force do to ensure we have all our Lane 2 launch providers operational on both coasts?
assured access to space requires that kind of resiliency. That's industrial-based resiliency as well as geographic resiliency and different rocket systems so that a problem in one doesn't create an assured access problem for us. So I agree with you. We are working quickly, and there is a pathway to getting ULA certification on the Western Range. And I just was out there and I listened to the leadership team talk about their long-term infrastructure plan to add additional launch complex capabilities to allow for other entrants to have the launch complexes they need as well. So long-term plan, those aren't quick, but we do have a plan in place to do that.
Thank you. Well, the quicker the better. General Saltzman, are there plans to make TAC SRT a program of record? If not, why?
Because it's heavily reliant on commercial services. And so I don't want to take it on as a program of record where it's organically done by us, because I think we would miss out on the innovation we get through the commercial imagery providers. And so TAC SRT, the benefit of it is that we only pay for what we need when we need it, and we allow the commercial industry to innovate as quickly as possible. I just need the money to bolster the marketplace so there's a continued demand signal for that commercial imagery.
Thank you. And my last question may not get to an answer, but General Saltzman, can you speak to the Space Force's commitment to the TAC-RS initiative, particularly how it plans to continue to support responsive space maneuvering for orbital warfare and space surveillance?
Yes, sir. Tactically responsive space is a key element of what we're trying to do, and we're committed to getting it better and more robust as we go forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman from California. Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Mismer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, witnesses, for being here today. General Saltzman, during an interview earlier this year, you stated that the Golden Dome would need a layered approach, with the Space Force playing a central role in this new initiative. How significant is a contribution of Space Force have from a space-based interceptor and space-based radar perspective?
Yes, Congressman, we are central to that effort because there's going to be a sensor network that has to be space-enabled, that will have to move the data quickly, which will have a space component to it as well. And then, as mentioned in the executive order, that space-based interceptors is technology that we're pursuing. But it'll be a system of systems that's going to be more than just the Space Force to try to stitch together.
Right, which leads to my next question. Have there been preliminary conversations on how the Space Force will contribute and integrate with other service branches?
Absolutely. It's absolutely essential that we do.
Okay. Secretary Mink and General Alvin, can you also comment on the Air Force contributions to the Golden Dome for American Initiative?
Yeah, Congressman, again, as that plays out, we do believe that there's the air layer in there. So there's a sense of domain awareness that we have to do. We need to understand how we can support and integrate with the sensing and the capabilities that are coming from space to be able to either work with through C3 battle management, integrate that command and control with it, or be able to do the defensive interception of hypersonic and cruise missiles coming through the air domain and air layer. But they come through multi-domain, as General Saltzman mentions. We all look at this multi-domain. So my part of the United States Air Force is to ensure that we have those capabilities to integrate overall in the Golden Dome.
Okay, thank you. Which kind of leads to my next question, General Alvin. During the Senate Armed Services Committee a few weeks ago, you stated that air and missile threats are evolving from both a speed and sophistication standpoint, hypersonics being one of the more significant new threats. How has the Air Force prepared for rapid innovation by Russia and China in their hypersonic programs?
And so defending against hypersonics, and then there's creating our own hypersonics. I think you're alluding to the defense against hypersonics. This becomes more and more challenging, and we find that it's one of those, it's not just an Air Force-only problem. It is a joint force problem. Anytime you have fixed defenses or things that could be the target of those sort of hypersonics capabilities, ballistic or cruise missiles, this is a overall joint force challenge. And so we are looking at anything from the kinetic effectors to directed energy to the non-kinetic, understanding that these are threats we need to have a layered approach to, and the further out you can get after them, the better. And if you can actually get after them to where as they're seeking their target, so through their long-range kill chain, you can interrupt that, we're looking at that as well. So we're trying to make sure that we aren't just fighting from a point defense area, we're trying to fight them from as far away as possible.
Further left of boom as possible, right?
There you go.
And does that obviously involves combining ground and satellite sensor systems?
Absolutely, multi-domain, as General Saltzman has said many times.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Mink, the Air Force's ability to project power through global strike and rapid mobility is critical. How is the Air Force integrating directed energy systems into its airlift and aerial refueling programs to protect these assets from drone threats during high-intensity conflicts?
I believe what I can say at this level is that we are looking at directed energy across the spectrum for both protection and defense and offense.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Mink, when President Trump recently spoke at Michigan's Selfridge Air National Guard base, he stated that the United States Air Force will likely invest in the Guard to reinstate fighter wings. In my district, in the 8th District of Indiana, the 181st Fighter Wing transitioned in 2008 to the 181st Intelligence Wing. Bringing fighter capability back to Indiana is a priority of me and my district. What can Congress do to assist the Air Force in expediting the process of re-implementing fighter capabilities to former fighter wings?
Let me take a start at it and then hand over to General Alvin for additional comments. So the biggest thing is support us in the production of the aircraft as we both grow all the way across from the F&EXs to the 35s, F-47 going forward. The more airplanes we have, which is what we need, the more opportunity there is. General Alvin, other comments?
Absolutely. It's about the funding, and quite frankly, when we're looking at the overall capabilities, we sort of do need to squint into the future and long range and say the capacity as far as physical assets in the Air Force is going to be different in the future from what it is right now. So just trying to regurgitate to make sure we have capabilities at the same number of installations that we have before, I think is something we're going to need to be very careful about. We're so proud of what Indiana has done in the transition to that wing. I think it's very important. So it's an overall force structure where cyber and intel are gaining in importance. We want to make sure we just don't recreate what we had before.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Bell.
First, I want to express my disappointment with the chair for recognizing North Carolina barbecue and not St. Louis and even Kansas City. General Saltzman, General Alvin, thank you for being here today and for your continued service to our nation. I also want to join my colleagues in congratulating you, Mr. Secretary, on your recent confirmation to the role. And also want to recognize the service members sitting behind you. Thank you for your service as well. I'm proud to represent St. Louis, a region that plays a critical role in our national security. Every day, my constituents contribute to vital missions from intelligence work at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency to sustaining global mobility at Scott Air Force Base just across the river, to advancing the capabilities of our warfighters through aerospace innovation and manufacturing. St. Louis is home to the production of some of the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world, including the F-15EX. Our region also plays a central role in the development of the Air Force's sixth-generation fighter jet. However, while these contributions are vital, we must also recognize that the same people building our national defense are facing severe challenges at home. Many are still recovering from the worst natural disaster to hit our region since the late 1950s. My constituents are dedicated Americans helping to defend our country not only in uniform, but through their work on our defense industrial base, who now need our support. We cannot overlook their needs, nor can we afford to weaken the very industrial base they sustain. That brings me to another crucial concern. The Air Force has contracted for 98 F-15EX aircraft with final delivery expected by 2029. I'm concerned that without continued procurement beyond that point, we risk not only losing critical workforce capacity in places like St. Louis, but also jeopardizing the strategic resilience of our tactical aircraft industrial base. General Alvin and Secretary Mink, do you agree that maintaining a degree of redundancy in the nation's tactical fighter manufacturing capability is a strategic imperative?
Thank you for that, Congressman. I do, and the F-15EX, it's so far it's proving itself out very well. We will see going in the FY26 budget and beyond what the possibilities for the future are. But we are seeing that it is putting more weapons on rails, and being able to do that is a very relevant way in the Indo-Pacific.
Secretary, did you want to?
Agree. And you know, we have multiple Lockheed Boeing. There are two primary F-16s are still being built in the U.S. So we actually have three contractors who are building fighters in the U.S. I think it's important to maintain that level of redundancy for competition in the future, as well as just, you know, resilience.
And then, given the evolving and unpredictable threat environment our warfighters are now facing, what is the rationale behind not maintaining two active tactical fighter production lines until the next generation aircraft is fully operational? General?
I think we are.
Yeah, if your question is why aren't we having more fighter lines, it's a matter of resources. I mean, we would take all the resources, and those are prioritizations against, you might want to make sure also they're competing with munitions, also with the refueling capability, also with the infrastructure. And so it really is just a matter of trying to build the whole force to the level that we think the nation needs, and not having a misshapen force that has too much of one thing that can't be used because we don't have everything else.
And the F-15EX that just achieved initial operational capability last year is an even more capable aircraft, building on the payload, range, and speed of the F-15 with the addition of next-generation capabilities for enhanced lethality and survivability. Can you talk about the importance quickly of the F-15EX to the Air Force's fighter fleet?
Adding that in, it's starting to prove its worth, not only in our exercises, but in our larger scale exercises, and seeing it performing in the Indo-Pacific. It provides more weapons on rails and more range and more relevance and survivability in the Indo-Pacific.
Okay. And I'll yield my remaining seconds back to the chair if he wants to respond to the allegations that I made.
We're going to resolve this. Probably the night of the NDAA, we'll have to have a little competition. We'll engage. With that, I will recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Crank.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colorado has nothing to offer in regards to barbecue, by the way. Secretary Mink, I hope you'll agree with me that the number one priority of the federal government is our national security, and that the first question our military leaders must consider when making major decisions is how it could affect defense on the homeland. With that in mind, and cognizant of the growing space-based threat from China and from Russia, to your knowledge, has the location of U.S. Space Command headquarters at Peterson Space Force Base caused the Air Force to need to withhold or suboptimize any support to the command in any way that has undermined readiness?
And I'll ask for a little help from General Saltzman here as well, but with respect to the current Space Command location, we've been supporting them to the full level required for them to get to FOC. As you're aware, I'm sure there's restrictions with respect to MILCOM, but we are supporting them for readiness at this point.
Yes, Congressman, we have not seen any drops in readiness as a result of the location.
Okay. And as you may know, Mr. Secretary, Section 2889 of the fiscal year 2024 NDAA blocked the Department of Defense from constructing a new headquarters for Space Command at Peterson Space Force Base until the DoD IG and the GAO released their reports on the 2023 basing decision, led by the Secretary of the Air Force, that found Colorado Springs to be the best home for Space Command. The DoD IG report has been released, revealing the alarming loss of capability and personnel that would result if Space Command was moved from Peterson. And the GAO report finally came out last week, highlighting the unique benefits to the command that the close proximity to Northern Command allows. The GAO report also says that Space Command is struggling to meet its staffing needs due to uncertainty regarding the command's final location, and this is delaying the command's ability to build long-term institutional knowledge. The result is clear. The most effective home for Space Command is Peterson Space Force Base in Colorado Springs, and it's essential the issue is put to rest once and for all, so Space Command and the men and women who work there can put their full focus on one goal: defending the nation. Secretary Mink, now that the conditions of Section 2889 have been satisfied, is it your understanding that the planning and design of a permanent headquarters building for Space Command at Peterson will resume immediately?
So, Mr. Congressman, we are in the process of reviewing the report, the final report out of the GAO. I would defer questions on the final decision for location of Space Command to White House Legislative Affairs.
Okay, thank you. General Saltzman, any comments?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Very quickly, in the FY 2025 NDAA, Congress required the Department of the Air Force to submit a report to Congress on how it intends to better coordinate emerging space activities, such as spacecraft reentry recoveries at DoD test ranges with other federal agencies like the FAA. The report was originally due on January 31st of this year. The Air Force then delayed delivery of the report to March 31st, then to May 31st, and then last week it was delayed again to August 31st. Meanwhile, U.S. commercial reentry operators are seeking out and currently utilizing reentry landing sites in other countries, such as Australia. I know this all took place before you were sworn in, Mr. Secretary, but it's frustrating that we'll not have this report until after the committee drafts and marks up this year's NDAA. Mr. Secretary, I'd like to respectfully ask for your commitment that this report will be delivered to the committee no later than August 31st, and that it will contain a description of the factors leading to its delay. I'd also appreciate a briefing on the report as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'll commit to getting that to you as soon as possible. I have to go back and check on the status, and I'll let you know one way or another.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for your service, and congratulations on your confirmation. Yes. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentlelady from Hawaii, Ms. Takuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, in 2004, the Air Force completed a full environmental impact statement for the closure of Johnston Atoll following decades of nuclear testing and chemical weapons storage. That exit process took years and involved extensive interagency and stakeholder coordination. Now, as the Air Force moves to reactivate the site for the Rocket Cargo Vanguard program, we're seeing far less rigor. An environmental assessment promised for public comment in April is now delayed until the fall. And from what we're hearing back home, the process feels very rushed, risky, and dismissive of ecological and community concerns, especially given that Johnston is a national wildlife refuge. Coming from Hawaii, I fully recognize the strategic importance of this project to advancing forward logistics and sustainment in the Indo-Pacific. But that being said, if a full EIS was necessary just to close the site, why isn't one being done now to reopen it, especially given the ecological sensitivity, the long-term risks, and the growing public concern around Johnston?
Congresswoman, we continue to value safety not only for the people in the military, but the communities. I'm not that familiar with that particular issue, but I will make sure I go check on it and get back to you on why we're not doing additional activities there. I know General Alvin, if you have any.
Well, I can definitely tell you that there's concern that at least an EIS is not being done and the EA is delayed. I would also suggest then, as you further review this, given SpaceX's role in this project, we would love the Air Force, in fact, we would like the Air Force to factor in the company's environmental track record, particularly incidences like those at Boca Chica, where wastewater discharge violations were confirmed by the EPA when evaluating the environmental risks in this assessment. Are you familiar with the fact that SpaceX is involved in this project and they've had past environmental issues and concerns in other areas where they're stationed?
I'm aware of the operations of SpaceX in that area in the past. I'm not fully aware of the environmental impacts, but I will take it for the record.
Okay. Again, in looking at this environmental assessment and perhaps why a full EIS should be required, considering the partners involved have been in violation of various discharge regulations, I would suggest that. I raised this, issue as part of a larger conversation unfolding across Hawaii. As you know, we're in the middle of land lease renewal negotiations ahead of the 2029 deadline. And just recently, the Hawaii Board of Land and Natural Resources rejected the Army's EIS for Pakuloa training area and will soon consider Army training lands on Oahu. In Hawaii, environmental stewardship matters. Respect for our natural resources, the waters that surround us, the ecosystems that connect us, and how the military across all branches handles sensitivity towards environmental and cultural issues shapes how our community views your presence and your partnerships, especially in the Pacific, where our lands and waters are all seen as connected in one. All of this matter. So while the Army may be at the center of those land lease debates today, the Air Force actions on Johnston Atoll, which Native Hawaiians call Kalama, are part of that same equation as to how this will proceed successfully or unsuccessfully going towards 2029. And I think we all want to find a sustainable path forward, but one that respects, recognizes, and embraces and protects our host culture, our natural resources, and our ecosystems. So I look forward to your response to that when you are prepared. Wanted to move now to NOAA and our capacity, given that we are currently and officially in hurricane season. NOAA is forecasting a 60% higher chance above normal year for experiencing a hurricane. This is especially high stakes for Hawaii and other coastal communities. The Air Force and NOAA have a vital partnership through Hurricane Hunter flights, which collects life-saving data to support storm forecasting, evacuation planning, disaster response. But a recent GAO report found that both agencies are struggling to meet growing demand due to aircraft maintenance issues, staffing shortage, and poor coordination. It's now further compounded by the fact that there was a decision to slash NOAA's budget, lay off 2 of its 8 flight directors and an engineer, reducing its mission capacity by over 25%. Do these reductions concern you, and what steps is the Air Force taking to respond to the GAO's findings and ensure both the continued accuracy of our storm forecast and the strength of our partnership with NOAA?
I certainly can't speak to the impact with respect to NOAA, but I can tell you that our performance from the hurricane hunters and all those who gear up every year for this is they are preparing and certainly looking to put their best foot forward in whatever Mother Nature brings. But I don't have a sense really of how the impact.
Are you aware of the GAO report?
I have not read it.
Okay, if you could please, I ran out of time. If you could look at the report and respond how you will be addressing those shortages in addition to NOAA's 25+% cuts.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Amadei.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, I have the honor of representing Arizona's 8th Congressional District. I am the only member of our delegation on the House Armed Services Committee. And right next to my district is Luke Air Force Base, home to the world's largest fighter wing. Elsewhere in the state, we have Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, a KC-135 refueler wing in Phoenix, and the Barry-Goldwater Range. Now, the Air Force is of huge importance to Arizona. But my first question is to you, General Alvin. It was good to have that phone call with you earlier this year, and I know you have deep roots in Arizona and Pine Top. And it's pretty rare to meet somebody from Pine Top, Arizona. But General, I'm concerned about what I've heard. While I agree that we have too many flag officers and too much bloat, I received confirmation recently that Luke Air Force
and the reorganization for our Air Force. Yeah.
So has any decision been made yet?
It hasn't become final, but it's certainly in our planning horizon.
Okay. I just have concerns with it because Luke Air Force Base trains 75% of the world's F-35 pilots, and I know image and stature matter with our foreign partners quite substantially, and it's important to keep a unified command behind a one-star general at Luke Air Force Base. But if you have an assessment, can you send that over to us for the ramifications of Luke Air Force Base for the downgrade, potential downgrade?
Sure, we can put an assessment together for you. I think to your point about the value of Luke Air Force Base, that is undeniable. But I think more so than stature, our foreign partners look at the quality, and the quality is there in the instructor pilots and all of that. I'm not sure that a general officer versus a colonel leading that is as important as a quality of training. That when you're trained by the best in the world, that's how you aspire to be the best in the world. So we're never going to let that slip at all, because that is what the real value of Luke Air Force Base is in the instruction. I think.
Of course, but it's also being led by a one-star general this whole time, so I just worry that a downgrade, I don't want to see it affect our training mission over there. But hopefully we can arrange a meeting with you and the Secretary with the Arizona delegation to talk about this further as well. And I have another question, I believe for you, General Alvin. As you know, Arizona is home to the massive Barry-Goldwater Range, and used by the Marines and the Air Force, and our Fort Huachuca as the Army's premier test bed for unmanned systems. And now, no single post, base, or range can enable the testing across the expanse of kill chains. Yet we can link these different domains together to simulate island chain warfare even within the American Southwest. So how do we better connect all the airspace, land area, and signal spectrum owned by different branches and think bigger and broader about joint capabilities rather than just within the service silos?
It's a great point, Congressman. It's about collaboration, coordination. We're getting there. We're doing that. We're seeing that. Of course, as you know, the ranges were, because of Arizona's unique sort of topography and geography, those were great things for each service. But right now, to your point, we can stitch them together and we can replicate something that really can't be replicated in many other areas of our United States, and that is sort of a long-range kill chain scenario. So we are working with the FAA, and we're coming to the sort of the final throes of a negotiation to be able to do that on a more periodic basis and sort of more routinize it. But right now, we have been stitching them together to do these in exercises like Bamboo Eagle. It's a unique opportunity in a place so close to the West Coast that we are continuing to work with the FAA to make sure that's something we do more often. But it's just coordination and collaboration amongst all services. We can all see value in it.
Very good. And congratulations, Mr. Secretary, for your recent confirmation. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Vindman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for coming today. General Saltzman, General Alvin, great to see you again. And Mr. Secretary, congratulations on your confirmation. I have 3 military installations in my district, about 25 miles from where we sit right now. Dahlgren is a Navy base, but it houses the 19th Delta, and I was privileged to go down there and observe the unique and critical skills and frankly the integral role they play in national defense. And so I just want to mention that I was truly impressed by the work they do there. I want to turn my attention to Operation Spiderweb, which revealed how adversary military or terrorists could coordinate mass drone swarms, electronic jamming, and long-range precision strikes to paralyze U.S. strategic bombers, power projection capabilities before even a single shot is fired. It's really, if you think about it, a poor man's Air Force. In fact, these drones exhibit the same characteristics and advantages as an air component does. So, Secretary Meinke, General Alvin, General Saltzman, I'm going to open this to all 3 of you. What specific investments or shifts in doctrine are the Air Force and Space Force making to detect, disrupt, and survive this kind of integrated domain attack?
I'll start and then have General Alvin jump in. We talked a little about before. I think you need to both look at the offensive and the defensive side of this equation. And the Ukraine attack demonstrated both, right? It demonstrated what you can do with a pretty innovative approach to utilizing UAVs at scale, but also the challenges if you don't defend against it. Right, so both of them are of interest to the Department of the Air Force, and we are investing on both sides. As we discussed before, you know, there is more than just the technical aspect of building systems to defend against UASs. It's really a whole government requirement. It's almost easier to defend some of our bases overseas than they are in the U.S. just because some of the restrictions and the air traffic that surrounds our bases and how careful we have to be. So you have to really look at both the technology side on the defense, on the technology side, and then on the whole government approach to getting the proper authorities so that you can operate and actually protect your bases against something like that. On the offensive side of the house, we're looking closely at that as well.
If I could leave it at that and let the generals also pop in here.
Yeah, I associate with what the Secretary said, and then, of course, as we've had conversations all through this hearing about this, this is an area where we're taking note. I would maybe adjust the characterization of a poor man's Air Force. It does do some things to the air domain, to be able to do it at scale, to be able to do it across all geographies, to be able to do it in different areas. Contestation is a little bit different. But the wake-up call is we've already been awakened to this, but it is showing that maybe our high-value assets, there's different ways we need to look at defending those. These are not just Air Force issues. These are joint issues as well.
And that's what makes it a poor man's Air Force versus the Air Force that we
Real
have.
Air Force, right.
General Saltzman, anything to add on that?
Well, just real quickly, it's the asymmetric attack that was most disturbing, I think. And one of the ways I'm thinking about that is as we put together a network of networks, that increases the surface area for attack. And so we have to make sure that from a cyber perspective, we're looking at the vulnerabilities, where the shortfalls are, where somebody might have inroads into our systems. You don't have to attack space capabilities on orbit. You can attack it in the networks. And so we're looking at cyber mission defense as a key attribute.
Thank you for that. So what I'm concerned about is that, I mean, I don't think we have really good deterrence against these types of threats, both from terrorists or from nation states, because we're not going to, if we have our bases attacked and we lose billions and billions of dollars in strategic assets. We're not going to drop WMDs or anything like that. We're going to have to respond conventionally. And if they have these capabilities and we've already been degraded, I just feel like we're in danger of losing deterrence in this regard. And especially if we think about the fact that they're killing the archer, not the arrow, that is a critical approach. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, given the nature of this threat and how far behind we are, I'd suggest we go as far as creating a select committee to address the revolution in drone warfare, both in the offense and defense. We know the regulatory issues associated here. There are statutory issues. There are multiple committees in the House that this has overlapping jurisdiction and industrial areas. And the costs, if we fail in this regard, are just too large to imagine, I think. 8 seconds. Does Golden Dome do anything to protect us against this threat? Yes or no?
I'd say it's too early in the mission analysis to determine.
Okay.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Michigan, General Bergman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to the fight, Mr. Secretary. General Alvin, nice to hear you use the phrase warrior ethos. Warriors don't leave warriors behind, no matter whether it's in basic training, in the fight, in housing. And General Saltzman, great to see you. I got good news and bad news. So let's start with the bad news. The Air Force is, I believe, way behind in fulfilling its obligation at Wurtsmith Air Force Base in Oscoda, Michigan. Subject is PFAS. There's been a lot of promises made over the years, and despite years of testing and monitoring the PFAS levels in the groundwater, like Van Etten Lake, which is right next to it, still sits at literally tens of thousands of times above the EPA and Michigan safety standards. So given the persistent and severe PFAS contamination, too many syllables for Marine, we're behind. The Air Force is behind. I know you're coming into this, but there's been promises made, but promises not kept over too long a time. We've done all the testing necessary, but the delay that the interim cleanup would be in the interim cleanup to address most of these, the PFAS plumes, has not occurred. The remedial actions have been delayed for years, and now are not expected to begin until late in 2028 or potentially 2029. So this really is a breach of trust with the local residents up there, and because they're concerned about that. Now, it's a combination, but we've been dealing with this for, well, let's put it this way, too long a time. We're talking decades now. So I'm not gonna ask you how the Air Force is justified in doing the delays. I'm asking you to dig into it as the new secretary and make this right for the folks up there, because we know PFAS is not going to go away on its own, and there has to be mitigated cleanup. I sound like I'm giving a lecture now, but I just wanted to inform you of this because we're leaving some warriors behind and their families with the PFAS piece. Now let's turn to something a little positive. Selfridge Air National Guard Base is now slated to get F-15EXs. In fact, I did literally a personal drive tour at the base a couple of days ago because I still have my retired military ID, and I can just go on the base, and they didn't even know I was there, which is great because then nobody was trying to show me what they wanted me to see and not what I wanted to see. The point is, Selfridge is a base that, given its proximity to the Great Lakes and the training ranges that we have, the capabilities that are there right now, currently the A-10s that are being phased out. By the way, there was a flight of 2 taking off when I pulled in, and they were landing as I left. So it was really kind of interesting that, the powers that be gave me a free air show there, the A-10s, as they leave. But the challenge is the EXs are coming. The A-10s are leaving. We don't want to accidentally create a gap where the people who do the maintenance and all the technical capabilities, that we don't lose readiness because of that. So I'm really not asking you for answers now. I'm asking you just for the the prioritized consideration of blending when the A-10s leave with when the EXs arrive so we don't accidentally create some personnel gaps, skill set gaps, whatever it happens to be, okay? You all are in a different fight because Space Force is going to fight in space. The Air Force is going to fight, you know, in the sky, what the Air Force does. The challenge we have as a committee is understanding how your vision of the fight is developing and how we appropriately fund you without some of the maneuvering that has gone on in the past, okay? You be honest up front, you're going to have a pretty much a bipartisan effort here to support you. So I'm glad you're here, but let's get rolling on the PFAS up there and honor our commitment to those fine men and women up there, and just consider how we avoid the personnel gap. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, you have displayed an impressive command of the issues and refreshingly candid and unscripted. So thank you for that. I have the opportunity, I'm a hard-working guy, but I believe I'm the only enlisted veteran of prior service, Army, military, police corps on this body, which is why the chairman gives me the privilege of questioning last on a regular basis. I talk to my people and across my district and state and indeed the country, and the American people are stakeholders in the decisions that we have to make regarding deployment of our assets and how we spend our money. And the American people have been through a lot and have been paying attention. Some things have happened. Recent phenomena of the drone incursion on the East Coast. This was alarming to the American people. Observations of modern warfare and surprise attack in the Russian-Ukraine war. The people are observant of this. The terrorist actions in our own homeland. Shocking. What we went through in 2021, 22, 23, and 2024 regarding open borders, our southern border. This all together has impacted the American citizenry and brought us to a point where there's a clear understanding amongst the Americans I speak to that our military must posture domestically to stage effectively to be able to patrol our borders and our maritime borders and to respond to threat, which brings us to my question to you, gentlemen, Mr. Secretary and General Alvin, regarding the 159th Fighter Wing at Belle Chase in Louisiana. The National Guard there supports a 24/7 aerospace control alert mission with F-15C support. It ensures our maritime southern border response in the Gulf of America and to protect against threat. But I'm concerned that the Air Force is not fully focused on the utility that the F-15EX, that unique capability can bring to maintaining our southern border security, which again America is calling for, our security against unknown and alarming and surprise attack from the air and the sea. I spoke with General Guillotte of NORTHCOM about having F-15EXs at Belle Chase. He wants them. He wants F-15EXs. So I ask you, Secretary and General Alvin, what are the plans for F-15EXs for the 159th Fighter Wing in Louisiana?
The plans for that really haven't changed. They're coming to Louisiana. Now, as we have this new integration, some of the fielding of it is how fast we can get Boeing to produce. I mean, we procured them, and then we're trying to find the right feathering of this in with the Selfridge decision from the President to ensure that we don't have a gap anywhere. We want to ensure that until we switch to the F-15EX, we make sure those Cs are like the platinum F-15Cs.
Yes,
but we're on path to continue that as we have to make sure that the F-15EXs do come to Belle Chase.
This is a beautiful answer, and I stand at your avail, good sir, to assist in that. And I happen to have a pretty good relationship with the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. I feel confident that he'll help as well. Mr. Secretary?
Yeah, the chief hit it nail on the head there. That the challenge with the F-15E is the same challenge we've had with the 35 and the B-21 now. It's getting the production rates to what we need to support what we're trying to do, right? It's very difficult to ramp up the production rates on these platforms, so we're just managing that across the board.
And there's certainly recognition in your office, sir, and amongst your senior staff that the American people were alarmed about some of the things we have suffered and observed.
I think we were all alarmed at it as well, as with the American people, for sure.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time has expired. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. I want to thank the witnesses. Good job. Thank you for what you do for our country. Thank you for being here today, and we are adjourned.